If everybody's ready? Dr. Harrison?
I'm ready, I'm sorry.
All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Elaine, did you give me a printout or no? Is it there? There it is. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we are all ready for tonight. So we have a very full agenda tonight. So we're going to do our best to make our way through it. The highlight, of course, is the presentation of the 2015-16 budget from Dr. Harrison. But we also have some other very important things in this agenda, so we hope that you will all stay for that, especially our GOB winners. Just kidding.
No, they have to do homework.
You're allowed to leave after you've received your awards. But the first order of business is to have a motion to accept our agenda. Can I have a motion to accept our agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we are off and running to the recognition of our GOB winners. I can say that I'm very happy for you, of course, but you did beat my daughter, so I have mixed feelings about that. But I also have admiration for you because she studied hard, and I know you studied harder, so congratulations in advance. But we usually start off with a few words from Ms. Chapnick or Dr. Harrison.
No, certainly know what it takes to be sitting here today and how challenging that competition is, and we applaud all the students that were courageous enough and certainly had their smarts that they shared with the school community, but we're just so proud of all of your accomplishments, and we want to invite Ms. Chapnick up to say a few words and to introduce the students we're going to honor this evening. So Ms. Chapnick.
Good evening, everyone. So, can I lower this, or? Good evening, everyone.
Yes.
So, we have two students here with us tonight who we're so very proud of for their accomplishments at the Geography Bee. And so this year, Main Street School, with the support of the PTSA, so we thank the PTSA, held its 6th annual Geography Bee. And we went 11 rounds, head-to-head with our winner and our runner-up. So they did an amazing job. So Anton Dudvakai is our runner-up for the Geography Bee. And Andrew Zhu, why don't you stand up so we can give you a round of applause? Andrew Zhu is our winner of the 2015. Both of you can come on up. And the board will acknowledge you, so shake my hand. Shake my hand. Okay. And so they did such an amazing job. We were at the edge of our seats the entire time, because the way the Geography Bee works is that all of the finalists, so the students in the school, interested students participate in a pre-bee, and from the pre-bee surfaces students who will move ahead to the actual bee, and we call those the finalists. And so when they get up on stage, the first round, everybody gets a question. And in order to get out or sit down from the bee, you have to get 2 incorrect answers. And so our runner-up and our finalists went the entire 11 rounds, and we thought we were going to be there all day. It was amazing. We're at the edge of our seats, and they did such a great job. So please give them a round of applause. We're so proud of our geography. Go this way. This way. Be in front. No, right. Go right around.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Well done, Andy.
Congratulations. Come back. You get that. Congratulations. What a fist pump. All right.
Great job.
Good job. There you go.
Great job.
I'm the end of the line. Congratulations.
So congratulations, boys. We're very proud of you. Thank you, Ms. Chapnick. And, you know, boys, you have something to look forward to because you know you can keep competing all the way through middle school in the GOB. So many more years to look forward to, and congratulations. We're all very, very proud of you tonight. Well done.
Oh, yes. So our first order of business, I guess you actually listened to me. You're staying. Thank you very much.
Not for long. He didn't mean it.
So our first order of business is the superintendent's report from Dr. Harrison. Two items of, well, more than two, but go for it.
I will.
Yes.
I will. So, very good and good evening once again, everyone. A number of important things to talk about tonight, but first I would like to congratulate and acknowledge another one of our students who doesn't happen to be in the audience tonight, and that's Miles Novick, who was just named a National Merit Finalist. Miles was one of approximately 15,000 finalists from a pool of 1.4 million students from over 22,000 high schools. He's being recognized for his scholastic achievements, participation in school and community activities, and student leadership. We certainly think this is an accomplishment that he, his family, and the entire school community should be proud of, so we want to extend our congratulations to Miles. I also want to acknowledge two great events that were held over the past week at the high school related to planning for college and the future of college. The first was in a very informative program that was held last Tuesday for those that came out on St. Patrick's Day. And it was the PTSA's annual parent-to-parent program, which provides opportunities for parents to chat with one another about the college process and the college experience and to support one another. And the other occurred last night when the high school sponsored Irvington University 2015, which was attended by over 100 families. The college night offered workshops facilitated by college experts on subjects such as application process, college planning, financial aid, transition to college, college admissions tests, and all those exciting things. We had great college experts here. We had representatives from Columbia, NYU, Sarah Lawrence, Hobart William Smith, Binghamton Ithaca, LaGuardia Community College. Both events were a tremendous success, and I want to extend our congratulations and special thanks to the PTSA, High School Guidance Department, and of course the high school administration. Two great nights that certainly are going to be beneficial to our students and their families. One issue that's been an ongoing topic and item of concern here up at the campus is traffic at drop-off and pickup time. No matter what efforts we've tried over the last couple of years, we seem to not be able to totally enhance the situation. Heading into this school year, we worked with Mr. Knowles and our police department to identify opportunities to increase parking, to try to provide our visitors with more parking spaces. Where we were successful in that area, I think we also complicated our problem a little bit because now there's places for people to park that are interfering with traffic, and folks haven't been abiding by the restricted parking zones that we have in the drop-off zone in front of the Mar Gym. So with the board's support tonight, we hope to be able to bring back a temporary parking lot monitor, a position that we used to have years back, but has gone unfilled in the past. We're hopeful that this individual working with Mr. Sotile and Mr. Cohen will be able to help monitor the situation. If there's cars that are legally parked in those zones at pickup and drop-off time, we can properly identify. In some cases, boot cars, wheels, issue some violations where appropriate to try to identify students that may be parked in faculty spots and the like, to try to improve the parking situation, but also to make sure our campus is as safe as we can make it. So we're optimistic that we're going to see some improvements there with this addition. Kindergarten enrollment season, and this year we've made some improved efforts to try to communicate with the community with some signage that we put down on Main Street thanks to the village. And so we're seeing our numbers rise a little bit. We're about 107 students so far, so we really start to track them in earnest in May. But we just want to kind of give a shout out to all those future kindergartners and their parents. If you haven't registered yet, please reach out to Dow's Lane and schedule an appointment because we want to know who everybody is and have those contacts made as soon as possible so we can plan appropriately for the next class of Dow's Lane. Also want to just acknowledge our girls basketball team who made it to the Class B Final Four. Despite losing in the semifinals, they played a great game, had a tremendous season, and certainly represented themselves and our community quite well. We certainly want to acknowledge their dedication and hard work and congratulate them on a wonderful, wonderful season. As we think about our spring sports season, this weather is going to provide some headaches for us, of course, and Mr. McCormick and Mr. Sotile have already delayed the start of modified sports, and Mr. Knowles and Mr. McCormick and I were out looking at fields today, so we have concerns about our fields that are like sponges, and where we had to do some work on Mazzaro's field to explore drainage possibilities to meet local and DEC and state requirements, that we have some areas that are kind of like quicksand right now and not allowing Gary and his crew to get out there and do the necessary work on the fields. But I want to assure the community that we're doing everything we can to get our fields up and running as soon as possible and start to give them the attention that they need. I also want to talk about testing a little bit. As we think about this time of year, we think about spring break, we think about warm weather, but also in that fold is the New York State testing season. In about 3 weeks, we're going to begin our grade 3 to 8 testing. So that is definitely on the horizon in the minds of certainly teachers and administrators, but I'm sure parents and students are beginning to think about it. I know there's been a lot of press this year with respect to New York State facilitating field tests in schools. Earlier this year, SED was supposed to review and adopt regulations related to field testing that would require schools to participate. And the Board of Regents tabled that discussion and has released no further information as to when it's going to be considered again. Currently, the Department of Ed, or SED, holds that this is a part of the state's required testing program, which we are mandated to participate in. However, there's nothing that specifically speaks to field testing within any kind of regulation or statute. Last year, there were a handful of districts across the state that did not participate in field testing. And there does not appear to have been any real consequence. I can say that the assistant commissioner called these districts out publicly, wrote about them publicly, actually sent tweets out naming the schools, and said some nasty things about them, intimating that they were hurting children by not having them participate in field tests. So this is a situation that's kind of near and dear for all educators. We recognize the need to be able to develop quality assessments and the need to be able to begin to develop questions that are going to evolve with the needs, whether it's the Common Core or the other evolution of our state's programs. But we have to think about what expense, where's the benefit going to publishing houses like Pearson. Our schools really get no information back from field tests that be able to help inform our work in the schools or to evaluate our students' progress or success on those tests. So I have real conflict about participating. As of today, I can tell you we have not received notice that the state wants us to participate in any 3 to 8 field tests. However, we did receive notice that the state would like us to administer the field test for the earth science regents. That would be held, I believe, Dave, in the first week of June is what they indicated in the communication to you. So once we received that communication, I immediately reached out to SED asking for the specifics. I understand that they tell us that it's mandated. They've said it in memos that it's mandated, but I specifically asked for citation of regulation and statute that may require us to do this. I've reached out twice and have not gotten a response as of yet. We have a little bit of time. If we are in a position where we are being faced with having to administer 3 to 8 field tests, which are going to be right around the corner, I think we would need to approach this a little more aggressively. So I'm going to certainly open to hearing feedback and thoughts from the board on the subject. But I'm going to continue to press SED every other day with a phone call or an email, trying to get an answer out of them. And if they choose not to respond, we can make a decision for what we think, a recommendation that would come from administration, and it would be a thought process with my colleagues and myself, and a recommendation that we would like to discuss with the board in an upcoming meeting. But it's something to consider, and I think this is a time for SED to really step up to the plate. And if they're going to mandate this, tell us why they need to do it, other than they need to develop future tests, and that they think it hurts kids by not participating. But right now, we're pressing them, and hopefully you're going to get some response. And if not, that I think informs our decision-making as well.
We have 3 board meetings in April. Any guess when we would be having that discussion, so we could kind of make it, we could communicate better to the community to get some participation in that?
Let me think back, because I certainly need time with the administrative team to work through what our collective thinking is on this. But acknowledge that it was important for me to bring this up and share it with the board and public tonight, because it's something that's before us. It's a situation that if we thought, that we were going to, even if we didn't get feedback, if we were going to have eyes on tests and get a sense and feedback from kids from their experiences, there could be some value in it. But at the end of the day, we have to think about what value we're placing on the state testing. We have to think about the time for our students, whether it's, we're thinking about instructional time that's lost by these tests, or the added layers of stress associated with them. But I certainly will report back to the board, and we will share that accordingly, so it'll be communicated to the public.
Okay.
But I also think it's fair, just not that we have a lot of community members here, a few, but I think it's just fair to get the word out to the community that this is something that's going on, and if they have any strong feelings, because I know it's a hot button. We know it's a hot button in the community, so the next board meeting, they don't have to wait for Chris's recommendation. If anyone has any comments or they want to make their feelings known, please come or email or let us know how you feel about it, since it is an important issue to so many people.
Yeah. So, and I guess related to that, and on the subject of other important issues, I know our PTSA has led some advocacy charges in the community, and they've sent out blasts. We've posted information on our Facebook page and the website. So I encourage anyone in the community that if you have opinions about any of the educational reforms that the governor has proposed, also thinking about state aid, which we're going to talk about again tonight, that we're still in a holding pattern here and knowing what's going to happen, to check out the information we have posted on those 2 sources. And there's direct links where you can click on a link and you can send a letter if you have an opinion that'll go to the governor's office and our local legislators.
And now that we have 700 members on our Facebook page, followers, I should say, we can use that to get some feedback from the community, right?
Yeah. And I think that's certainly something to toot our own horn about.
Yeah.
I recently attended a superintendent's conference and went to a workshop on communications. And it's pretty impressive to see a district our size, after having a Facebook page for a little over 2 years, to having 700 likes. So definitely people are interested and engaged, so that's quite exciting.
Along the lines of advocacy, that I know it's on 10.4 is the resolution, but I think certainly not tonight because we have a packed agenda, but I think given the climate that we're in now and what's going on, especially this year, but in the future, it might make sense when we have time as a board to have a conversation about, do we want to take a more active role moving forward? We've certainly kind of just inherited what board's done for a while, and I think maybe given that the climate's changed and everything's going on, it might be worth revisiting as a board.
Okay.
So just a couple more things on my behalf. Over you look at our upcoming agendas, I know we're going to be asking the board to accept some generous donations from the PTSA. Thinking about our students that are back and forth with Jacob Burns and working on their film projects, to the great IEF party on Saturday night, which appears from my perspective, being an attendee, that it was a huge success. We just don't say thank you enough to our partners at the PTSA and Education Foundation for the work that you all do on a daily basis to really make our schools an exceptional place. When we think about where we are and the good fortune that we have to have our kids educated in a school system like ours, We don't do it alone. We have awesome teachers, we have awesome administrators, great supportive parents, a supportive Board of Education. But, you know, when you think of those difficult times and where those difference makers are, where some of those hallmark experiences come from, we have the PTSA and Ed Foundation really to thank on a lot of those fronts. So I just wanted to, having had a lot of opportunity to reflect on it lately, certainly give a shout out to everybody and a great deal of thanks for all of your support and all the hard work you do on behalf of our kids. And then just simply a bond update. That, you know, really, sadly, since the last meeting, there's little new news to report. We have not heard anything additional from SED. We're still kind of in the same holding pattern that we were 2 weeks ago. We wish applications were moving through their system faster than they are. But there is no new progress to report on that front. We are progressing with the Dow's Lane office projects that that the board awarded a contract awarded the bid at the last meeting. And we actually have our first pre-construction meeting scheduled for this Friday, and we're developing all of our internal plans for moves and storage and all those details right now. So we're moving forward with that. Little pieces of the overall bond project that doesn't stop, though. We're still working with our neighbors in Field Point to work out some of the details with respect to the easements that are related to the drainage, where we'd be connecting Eastfield drainage to the drainage system that is in Field Point. We have a little bit of surveying work that we're addressing because there's some discrepant property lines between different sets of surveys that are on record. So our surveyors will be out here probably next week now that the snow has finally melted, to be able to try to answer those questions for us so we can proceed with trying to finalize the easements that we need. So when we're ready to break ground, we'll have all the details lined up. That's all I have tonight.
Great, thank you. Well, you're not quite off the hook, are you?
Well, I think I have a few more things to say
Yes.
tonight.
We have a brief discussion about our professional development plan for our staff members, and that leads to an action later in the agenda where we are expected to approve that to approve a professional development plan or certify it as part of the state's requirements. So at first, though, we have a brief discussion on the professional development plan, and I presume that's going to be Dr. Harrison and Dr. Kaur.
Yeah, no, certainly I'm going to defer to Dr. Kaur because this is one of the many, many important areas that she leads in our district on a daily basis. The PDP is a requirement for SED, and Raina is going to talk about the details and everything.
Sure. So I'll do 10 seconds of history. The PDP, the concept of an approved PDP plan started back in 2000 when the first APPR requirements were laid out for us. So most people think that the APPR started just a few years ago, but actually it's been in place. The requirement began in 1999, and by 2000 you had to submit an APPR plan. Many school districts actually did not submit APPR plans. And there was not a lot of regulation around it. We actually had one in place and have been in compliance, which made our transition actually somewhat easier. The point of the PDP plan, originally when it rolled out in 2000 with the APPR, was that if you're going to have an annual professional performance review for your staff, as a school district, you have a responsibility to provide professional development. So New York State wanted to ensure that all school districts had some documentation that said, we value professional development and we have a plan for how we are going to align our professional development with our expectations of APPR, as well as district and building level goals. So for many years, we had a PDP plan. The representation has always been a balance of teachers and administrators. And the purpose of the PDP has changed to some degree from year to year, but for the most part, it's a document that we've recreated year after year. Somehow in 2008, which I'm going to guess that's the last document that I was able to find, and I'm guessing there was a transition in this position. So there seemed to be
Yeah.
there seemed to be a period of time where this was not developed or created. And also fell off the front page news. So when APPR resurfaced, as it is today, the PDP was actually never resurfaced again as a document that we were required to do, although it still sat in the regulations. Recently, we were actually notified, and with the question saying, you know, we need to certify our PDP plan on a yearly basis. So what you have in front of you is the current PDP plan. It was created based on the old model, which was our accepted model that we certified year after year up until that point. And it has the similarities in that it puts down the goals, which are our theories of action and our goals. It is represented by a series of teachers and administrators. There's a guideline for implementation and also the role of the PDP committee. I would expect that our future plans would probably be a little bit more fleshed out and a little bit more representative of what we're actually doing now, which is a little bit different than when this original plan model was created. So currently what you have in front of you is a very accurate reflection of the work that we're currently doing in district. It reflects the annual professional performance review and our work with Charlotte Danielson in that we have an expectation that professional development is provided to teachers in instruction using the rubric and the Charlotte Danielson framework. And in addition to working toward our theories of action, our goals around 21st century learning, Rubicon Atlas, curriculum mapping, and all of those things that you've been hearing about are all sit under this umbrella document.
Would you like questions?
I'd love questions.
Okay. Questions we shall give you. Starting down here, any questions?
No, actually, this was part of our curriculum meeting, so this is a chunk of it we're not going to report on. So I've
Okay.
actually asked my questions already.
Down at the,
Same, I mean, we've
right, so you've heard this
talked
already.
about it at the curriculum meeting.
And just to be clear, this is something that we have to have on file, but it's not, and the board has to approve, but it doesn't actually get filed with New York State. It's in our files, just.
You're certifying that we have a plan. That's what you're certifying. New York State does not require the plan to be submitted.
And the other thing I found interesting is just asking, you know, how you got the teacher volunteers, and you said they are, you know, given to you. The union says these are the volunteers you're gonna get. So that is how the committee is formed. It's essentially the administration and the people that the union selects to be on the committee.
John, any questions? I believe we've seen this before, right? We've talked about this, and, yeah.
It was-
No, it was emailed to us, but
No, I thought we saw something similar to this in
We
an earlier meeting.
No, we
Yep.
discussed it with the curriculum committee. Raina presented
Okay.
it to them, and then it was in one of my weekly updates to the board. if you remember.
I think we've seen theories of action.
Right,
Yes.
that's what I was,
Framework in different ways, but I don't think we've seen it in this format. You know, as I've said before, I just have, you know, some general concerns over professional development, which I've, you know, repeated, so I don't need to go into that. I don't think I want to go into that again, but what I'm a little concerned in not seeing specifically is, I guess is maybe this is more an issue for the middle school and the high school, is content professional development, you know, people learning more about their fields, you know, chemistry or art or what have you. And would it make sense to, I mean, we have a lot of skill-based things, right? Like 21st century skills, et cetera. But I just generally worry about lack of efforts to deepen sort of what teachers know and what they can teach as well. Is that fair, or do you have any thoughts on that?
I would say that it's important to have a balance. I think we always want our teachers, and certainly in some of our courses, typically AP, super, some of those courses, we know our teachers go on a regular basis. Super in particular, they offer a very deep level of professional development for our teachers to keep them current and building their knowledge.
Oh, so super teachers, how many super classes do we have?
So super, we have English and we have super forensics. So those teachers are required to participate in professional development on a yearly basis to continue to build their knowledge and skill and ensure that they are prepared. Our AP teachers go on a regular basis as well. So I would say that, and I mean, certainly Dave.
And also, I don't mean to interrupt, but we dealt with it as a board when we, well, it's a good fact, John. When we negotiated the last teacher's contract, way back when, we actually changed the types of, the language regarding the types of courses that teachers could take to move columns, that it had to be within their.
Oh, yeah, I remember that, yeah, that's right.
Right, so teachers up to, exactly, so their degrees work within their content areas,
Yeah.
but within the district.
And with provision for administrative approval of what they did.
Right.
So the other way that that happens, though, for example, is the new social studies framework was just adopted by New York State. So once that new framework comes out, our teachers are very involved and engaged, going to different workshops, making sure that what we're teaching is aligned with those standards, but also making sure that their knowledge is at the level of depth that we would need it to be and expect it to be. I think we believe that we should have a balance of building content. Very often secondary teachers, especially high school teachers, are content experts and don't necessarily, in their educational preparation, they don't necessarily get the same level of training our elementary teachers get in teaching and pedagogy.
Right.
And so I think we always want to ensure that we have the balance of those two.
Right, right.
We value them equally, I would say.
Yeah, but I guess when, you know, I only read this a couple weeks ago and haven't gone back, but is that reflected here, or should it be reflected here?
I think it is reflected here because there's an expectation that in order to be a successful teacher in our district, you have to have a deep knowledge of your content. So as administrators, we have some teachers who have a very deep knowledge of their content, and we would guide them to gear more towards some of the pedagogy, whereas we have other teachers who we might work the reverse. So our goal is to ensure that every teacher is striving toward that balance in both of those areas. So I would say yes, but I'm happy to go through it again and make sure that it, has something that feels.
Sounds like it is part of the process, but maybe it's not, I don't know, may or may not be written down. I just
Okay.
can't.
I'll definitely go back and reread that.
Yeah, and just to me, the one thing that stands out made me think of the second bullet, under the second theory of action, developing all members of the school community, developing the knowledge and skills to support our students. So in my mind, it's inherent in that statement.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. So like I said, we have an action item later in the agenda to approve the certification of this PDP plan. So with that, we can move on to our main agenda item, which is the budget for 2015-16 as recommended by Dr. Harrison, our superintendent. And over to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, thank you. So obviously, I'm not too good when I'm holding the mic. I learned at the last meeting because I held it too close to my mouth, and so I'm going to try to stand behind the mic stand a little bit and not hurt everyone's ears. But when I think about where we are tonight, we think about budget process being one that's difficult. We think about it as one that's challenging, where the administrative team, my colleagues, and myself are working really hard to try to come up with opportunities to make the most of the resources that we have available to us to provide the very best education we can for our children. So we, as I've outlined previously, we go through an arduous multi-month process to get to where we are today. And a lot of thought and careful planning goes into the recommendations that we've made thus far in the process and that you'll see before you again tonight. But I also look to the Board of Education. You're put in a real challenging spot because you're wrestling with a number of things as well. You're thinking about the same kinds of things we are, about your obligations to wanting to advance learning for our kids, provide new unique opportunities, make sure we're maintaining our great facilities, but also with a real cautious eye to taxation, and thinking about that impact that we have for all of our community members. But just as those are real difficult decisions that have also been complicated by the uncertainty around state aid, which has us in flux with a lot of question marks, and facing challenges in this process tonight and over the next couple weeks. We also think about the fortunate position that we're in with a bond refinance. We have a sale coming up tomorrow, I think, and so we'll have some good numbers by the next time we meet. But looking at opportunity there, that's positive, that we're anticipating that we're going to save our community members about $5 million over the remaining years of that of those bonds. But I think we need to step back and reflect on what I was saying before when I spoke of the Education Foundation and when I thought about the work that they've done and what the PTSA does. And I think we have to, rather than coming at this through a lens of challenge, rather than coming at this through a lens of having to make difficult decisions, I think we should be positive about it. I think we need to step back and think about the good fortune that we have to be able to be in a tremendous school district, a district where our children are succeeding, where kids are going to great colleges, they're succeeding in and out of the classrooms, in the arts and athletics, and other community engagements. A school district where we have reward schools on a regular basis, a school district where we are ranked in the top 5% in the state of New York. And think about the joy that we should have in this work, to think about what we can do to make schools better for our kids and to enhance their experiences. So with that said, we've worked through a process. We've had lots of dialogue. We're trying to get folks to come out. So I'm going to look to a couple community members in the room. Please have your friends come to our future meetings. We'll be back here in 2 weeks. But we want folks involved. We want to hear what people have to say, and we want you to learn about what we're trying to do in our school. We set some good objectives for ourselves. We certainly, from the beginning, the administrators, and then, of course, our work with the board, we want to make sure we're being fiscally responsible. We want to find opportunities to enhance programs, introduce new things for our children, maintain our programs. But we also do not want to do that at the expense of those things that we value and those things that we need. And whether that's AP courses and honors and electives or the bus monitors, we want to make sure we protect those things that are important to everybody in our community. So with that said, we had a bit of a different process this year. We had a wonderful work session here in this room with the Board of Education and the administrative team back on January 27th. Where our principals came in and assistant principals and talked about their work that they've been focused on in the school. They reflected on things that grew out of the budget from last year, talked about initiatives that have been evolving in their particular domains throughout the year, and began to talk about what they saw their needs to be for the coming year. We started to work that into this budget process, starting with their voice, their thinking, their observations, their evaluation. And on February 10th, the administrative team, we presented that work, those things that they need to advance their schools or to attend to student needs. And on March 10th, we talked about the administrative, the operational side of things. And tonight it brings us forward to the superintendent's budget, which kind of brings this all together. We have to recognize that, certainly we have those challenges that we referenced before, and there's going to be adjustments that are going to occur over the next month. Some things that we're used to, because we know some numbers are always in flux. But with the absence of state aid and the unknown savings associated with the bond and refinancing, there's going to be a few more adjustments than usual. But thinking about where we are tonight, there's certain things that are important. We're considering where those challenges are. We're considering how we want to advance our schools. We're thinking about infrastructure. But when we bring that together, what does it look like? How do we process it? And to me, I thought there was a lot of value in stepping back and thinking, how can we chunk this? How can we categorize it? And we're doing so by looking at how we're increasing student opportunities, how we're investing in our facilities, and how we're looking to the future here. And we're going to review those considerations initially, the first cluster, by some district-wide items. And these are things that aren't new, but we're going to talk to them a little bit. And we started, I think, with the voices from the leadership team in the district, and I'm going to invite some of those voices to come up and speak to a couple of these items as we move forward. But where we are across the district, there's a couple initiatives that we're looking to impact many, many kids and have opportunities to enhance experiences for all of them. So we've kind of categorized some of these items as district-wide initiatives. The first, we've talked about Project Lead the Way, looking to expand our program at the high school, and then to introduce new experiences and opportunities at the elementary and middle school. I think all of us acknowledge that we've seen many articles, we've read the demand for better preparation for our students in STEM, and we think this is not only an opportunity to be able to prepare them for success in their future, but it's an opportunity to raise the bar on our curriculum, to really diversify the types of learning experiences that we have, and to really make something unique about Irvington. We think that we could have potentially elementary kids that are studying STEM, not just high school kids in our fantastic engineering and architecture program. We have a desire to continue to enhance our technology across the district, and not teaching technology, just throwing things in there, but making it meaningful, having kids hands-on with devices, providing more explicit instruction, whether that's through STEM, whether that's adding an AP computer science class at the high school as we intend to next year, but thinking about opportunities to put devices in kids' hands. In doing so, our district typically funds our technology purchases through a lease purchase, which we're proposing to do again this year, a 5-year lease. But this year, looking to do things a little bit differently. We're looking to embed the first year into our budget, and it'll allow us to get a year ahead, but it also helps us to stay afront of these needs. With that lease, we're looking to purchase 180 Chromebooks and mobile charging carts. That will allow us to have more opportunities for our children to be hands-on in classrooms, for teachers to broaden their curriculum by bringing in digital resources, or allowing our kids to develop new global perspectives by connecting with resources outside of the Irvington community. But it also helps us to become compliant for the park assessments, which New York State, while they have, again, not committed to, they've told us we need to be able to be prepared to administer computer-based assessments next year, so this would help us hit that minimum standard. The lease purchase of 50 new computers that would go into replacing machines that are at the end of their useful life, primarily at Main Street School is where we're looking for those replacements, and of course printers, smart boards, and projectors that are just at the end of their life across the district. In addition to those things that would be included in the lease purchase, we're also looking at building out a Wi-Fi structure at the elementary schools that will support Chromebooks, but also be able to support other wireless devices as necessary. We've talked about adding clubs. We've seen massive cuts in the club funding over the years. So some additional club funding. We're not looking for a huge amount of money, approximately $10,000, $11,000. But in doing so, we're going to be able to restore some opportunities or introduce new engaging experiences for our kids across the district. We've had some discussion in this room also about school social worker. And this is something that we've included in the budget, some personnel ramifications associated with it. But this is a move that's really cost neutral, but brings huge benefit to our students. We recognize that even in a community like Irvington, that we have a lot of families that have need, and that need is diverse. Whether that's folks that need some financial assistance or that need to be connected with social services, we have a lot of folks that are reaching out or don't know how to reach out for that support. One time, Irvington had a full-time social worker, and that was eliminated through budget cuts and reduced to a part-time community aid position. And when that individual moved on, we were unable to fill that position. So now we want to roll back the hands of time a little bit and do it with no new money, looking at eliminating one teaching assistant position. We're also looking at not replacing the community aid, so introducing this position, in essence, is cost neutral, but it will introduce a tremendous amount of services to our students across the district. And then finally, on a district level, we have requirements under new state regulations or updated state regulations, and this is a perfect example when we talk about unfunded or underfunded mandates. We obviously have students that speak many different languages in our school district, and we provide them with ESL, English as a second language, or the new terminology, ENL, English as a new language. And we provide services across the district as required by law and as our students need them. However, the state is required now that we meet a new model that they have proposed, and that model intensifies the level of service and thus requires additional staffing. So we have a need to hire another ESL or ENL teacher. And in doing so, we recognize there's cost associated with that of $90,000+ potentially when we consider benefits and salary. And just as a reminder for the board and the public that we receive approximately, I think, $8,000 or $9,000 of funding to offset these costs for what will become 2.5 employees that provide ESL services. Now as we begin to transition over to our other building-based requests, I'd like to ask Meg and Joyce to come up and say a few words about, that's fine, you can speak from there, some of the requests that are growing from the elementary schools that I've proposed to be included in our budget this year.
Good evening. We've talked before about foundations and how that was new for kindergarten and first grade this year at Dow's Lane. And I'd like to share with you, as we talk about expanding it into second grade, some of the benefits that we've seen at Dow's Lane and why we're thinking that this is a great opportunity for our students that we'd like to see continue into second grade. Students have accessed language so much faster than they ever have before, and we've heard that from our teachers, that they recognize their capital and lowercase letters faster than ever before. One of our staff members who services students as they're learning their phonemes, the sounds that the letters make, she's been servicing students at Dow's Lane for 20 years, and this was the first year that she saw students come into the group with a strategy, that they recalled their foundations lessons, they remembered their touch-tone words that they've learned, they've tapped out the sounds, both to decode as they're reading, and also for our students who access language easily when they're reading, that tapping out and blending of sounds has helped them encode or write out the words. And we've seen it transfer into handwriting, where all of the students are making the letters in the same way, that the consistency of the instruction of handwriting is far more consistent than we've ever seen. And also that during Writer's Workshop, students are willing to take a risk and stretch out and tap out those sounds and go for words to make their writing richer. And it makes sense for us to continue it in second grade so that we have full consistency. We've spoken to other school districts who use foundations. They generally go with K1 and 2 doing it. We started small with K and 1. We'd like to expand to grade 2 to continue that consistency, that support. As you go up in the grades, studies show you're coming into harder words, multisyllabic words, and it just makes good sense to go into second grade with foundations and support the students who are really experiencing success and feeling greater confidence when they're reading and writing. Or do we want to talk about math, AIS? Go right into. So for AAS, or what we call the elementary RTI instruction, it's for students who are having a little bit of difficulty navigating the instruction, and we have really great support, which we've talked about both at Main Street School and at Dow's Lane with regard to supporting students in reading. What we'd like to do is to continue to increase this level of support that we can offer to students in mathematics. So we have 3 full-time teachers who do ELA support at Dow's Lane, but we have 1 full-time math person, and we share a math person. Given the different starts in our day, it hasn't given us as great a flexibility to service the students, not only the number of students, but also the frequency and the intensity with which we can service them, which is also important. So some students, just because of scheduling, only receive a certain number of minutes per week. But if we had that full-time person that we could dedicate and increase it to 2 people at Dow's Lane and increase the support in math at Main Street School, we could see students more often. We could service them in different ways. We've been concentrating perhaps on problem solving. Could we also support them with their number sense and really offer some more support for them in that so they become more fluent and they can access the mathematics more easily? But this is not just a Dow's Lane issue. Since we have that shared staff member, it's also a Main Street School issue too.
Did that so well. So just to add, at Main Street School, currently we have 1.5 FTE of AIS support supporting 58 students with direct services. That doesn't include the students that they also monitor. And we have 0.8 FTE math AIS teacher supporting 45 students directly and that doesn't include the indirect monitoring. And so that one teacher goes between Dow's Lane and Main Street. And so just to add on to what Meg said about the limited flexibility in scheduling, right now our AIS schedule is really fixed. You know, we don't have the flexibility that we'd like to have with more of an RTI model. And so having the increase in AIS support would allow us to have students move more flexibly in and out of groups based on their needs, based on what happens on their mid-module or end-of-module assessments. Right now, students who are scheduled in and they're seen either 1 through 5 days a week, depending on where they fall in terms of their need of support. In addition, the benefit at Main Street School we're able to do, and what we would do even to improve the model, is increase our push-in model, and that would allow for the grouping in classrooms. So when an AIS teacher pushes into a classroom, that means that the instruction is delivered in the classroom setting, which provides an opportunity for a small group. So it allows for the AIS teacher to support those students who are struggling and sort of frees up the teacher, the classroom teacher, to really work with other levels of students. So whether it's the higher level students to enrich them, to push them to where they can go, or it provides more opportunity for instruction and differentiation. So
Can you just say the number? You said in the
Sure.
beginning, I missed it. You said there's 1.5 FTE for 58.
for ELA,
For ELA,
serve-
for 58 students.
58 students direct services.
Okay.
Because we also have something called monitoring, which is an indirect service where they consult with a teacher to provide strategies and ideas for support. And then we have 0.8 FTE math AIS support, servicing 45 students. And that doesn't include her indirect services. Now remember, that's her 0.8. She's also servicing students at Dow's Lane, so her numbers are pretty high.
And just one more thing to clarify.
Sure.
Because when I'm talking about the 2 schools and these FTEs that are AIS, in addition to that, we also have the math coach position, correct? That's an addition. You're not counting that in any of these calculations.
No, because the math coach is the math coach supporting teaching and learning instruction with the teachers in the classrooms, as well, but not directly servicing students.
Okay. And do we have similar numbers for Dow's Lane that Joyce
Yep.
gave?
So we have a number of students who receive just ELA support, just math support, and then students who receive both. So for instance, on second grade, we have 17 students who are being seen in RTI services, and 6 students for ELA and 6 students for math, but then we have an additional 10 students who are being seen for both. So right now, students just in the entire Dow's Lane population who are just receiving ELA RTI services, there are 53. Students just receiving math, 22. Students who are receiving both are 37.
I'm sorry, how many just math?
Just math, 22.
I
Also-
suppose the expectation is that these numbers will go up if you have more resources.
Yes, also going back to the flexibility question though too, so we have students right now who are seen 3 days a week by our floating service provider. So if they need more intensive services to increase to 5 days a week, they also have to change service providers. That's not very flexible, and it's really not great practice for the students either, to change from one service provider to another. And also, we really weigh heavily that we have the youngest students in the district, and it's really that ounce of prevention is worth a pound of good. We look at the students very carefully to see who we can pick up, who can fit in the schedule, and who do we give a little bit more time to. So because it's flexible, when we feel like a student can stand on his or her own again, we kind of withdraw the support slowly. This would give us more flexibility to scaffold it a little bit tighter and withdraw a little bit more carefully and more thoughtfully and slowly too. It really does speak to the flexibility.
Have we looked at the AIS numbers historically? I mean, I'm just wondering, are we seeing this number continually increase, and does that have something to do with the Common Core?
So an important piece of looking at the numbers historically is also at Dow's Lane, we've never serviced students in kindergarten for math before this year. Because if you remember, we did increase slightly from last year and it allowed us to pick up the kindergarten students. However, going back to how many students we've had in the past, we've had a good number of students that we had to support in the beginning, and we couldn't pick up the kindergarten students until mid-year this year. because we needed to make sure that the other students could stand on their own again and withdraw the support. So that's another factor, is that we're seeing an increase because we're also trying to go for the earliest population that we can possibly support too, given the rigor.
I just want to
Is that
interject,
data
so I
we
think,
could see? I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, why don't we hold questions to the end so they can get through? I thought you were just going to ask one or two quick ones, so, all right? So we can keep going.
That's fine. So Joyce, would you want to continue with the world language?
So another item that we're asking for at Main Street School is creating world language or a global citizenship experience at Main Street School. And this would look like it would be in 5th grade. So the idea right now is to have it be a 5th grade special, which would release our library media specialist from her special assignment, and she would now be available to support and partner with teachers on working with teachers to support the research process within the content areas, which is critical. You know, having that support and partnership with another teacher will really foster what's happening at Main Street School in research. So the reason we want to have it. So, you know, we want our students to have an awareness of the world. Currently, world language starts in the district in 6th grade every other day. Having it at Main Street School, you know, the thought is to have someone who is Spanish and French, because those are the languages that happen to be in the district, but we would also like to consider ways that we could design the class so that it also has a global citizenship perspective, meaning whether tapping into local resources or that would provide our students with opportunities to explore other languages and other cultures beyond French and Spanish, but being mainly taught by a teacher with French and Spanish. Asking for this really connects with the work that we've started at Main Street School this year, this idea of global citizenship, sort of sprinkling the idea that our students are not just part of this local, our Main Street School community, which is really important, and the local Irvington community and our surrounding New York community, but also, you know, how we're connected to the world. And we've talked a lot about, I heard the mention of our goals and theories of action earlier, but we've talked a lot about the dispositions that we want our students to have and to exhibit, and what we foster at Main Street School through the habits of mind work and through our character building framework really connects to this idea of global citizenship. And so this would be another layer to the work that we have started. It would provide a lens for students to experience language and culture and connect them using technology and other resources to bring that experience into the classroom.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Joyce. So now to transfer to my colleague at the secondary level, Mr. Sotile and Mr. Cohen. If you could please take a few minutes to talk about the initiatives that we're interested in supporting at your respective schools. So, Dave?
Sure. So thanks for the opportunity to just share a few thoughts tonight about some of the requests at the middle school. You know, I'll start with the first, and that is something that we are very grateful to have been able to begin work with this year, and that is an expansion or a restoration, really, of some of the funding that we have for clubs and opportunities outside of the classroom at the middle school. Thanks to the current year's budget, we were able to add several clubs to the experience for students at our school, and what, you know, I think I want to stress most importantly about those club opportunities is the fact that we work very hard to ensure that they come from students, that they come from student interest. And, you know, and we can point to a number of clubs over the course of time that have been formed because of interest by students. And in fact, one of the clubs this year, our geography club, the proposal that ultimately became the backbone of the club was actually written by a student. We you know, working with a teacher, but certainly through his own passion and then gathering interest from his peers and so forth, we've developed a thriving club in that regard. And you know, what's striking about it is that when those opportunities get presented, there's always more really good ideas than there are dollars to support them. So we haven't run out of those ideas, and I know that there's more to come. I wouldn't want to name one club or another at this point, because I think some of that is dependent upon the interests at a given point in time and where students are and where teachers are. But I would say that every time we talk about new opportunities for students beyond the classroom that enrich their experiences and deepen their connection with the middle school, There are, really high passions, really great deal of enthusiasm, and really great ideas and great work that come out of it to serve the community, to deepen their learning experiences, to build connections with one another and with their teachers, to make school more meaningful to them because of these applications, in many cases, of the learning experiences that they have in the classroom. So I can't say enough good things about this, especially given the fact that from a dollar standpoint, it's a relatively small amount, and from a meaning standpoint, I would say it's quite a high amount. So I'm excited to say that this proposed budget would support that opportunity for students, and it would be a meaningful one, I think. On another note, the request has been made for one additional special education teacher at the middle school, and I know that my colleague, Mr. Cohen, will talk about this, a similar request at the high school, and I'd say that those are connected, but they're also different, and the nature of services is different at the two schools. So I want to speak really specifically about what this means for the middle school, what an additional special education teacher to teach in our ICT, or integrated co-teaching model, means for all students. Presently, we have an ICT model at each grade level in 3 out of 4 main subject areas. Depending on the grade level, those are slightly different. And what happens in an ICT model is that the identical curriculum to any other class on that grade level, say an ELA ICT class has the same curriculum as a non-ICT class. That curriculum is delivered by 2 teachers instead of 1, a content specialist and a special educator. And within the classroom, there are some students who are placed there based upon requirements within their IEPs, and there are most students who are not placed there by any mandate. They're simply students in the class that they're taking that year for English or math or what have you. And the model supports the needs of the students who are struggling learners by providing them with a special educator who is a specialist in the needs of students with learning disabilities, who is able to support those needs in a very specialized way and promote the goals that are present on the student's IEP, as well as a content specialist. But the students who are not our struggling learners necessarily, or the students who are our mainstream students who are just going to their regular English class or what have you, they're supported as well. They're supported by a significantly lower teacher-to-student ratio, and thereby the ability to engage in more personalized activities, get more regular feedback from teachers, and take advantage of the expertise of 2 trained and highly qualified educators to meet their needs. And truthfully, when you observe these classes, you recognize that there are 2 teachers teaching, say, 24 students, not one teacher teaching 20 and another teacher teaching 4 or 6 or whatever the case might be. That's how the model works, and that's what it's there for. It's there to teach all students and support all students. And it ensures that the students who are at most need get the additional level of support that they need, and it ensures that the students that are in that class that don't fall into that category of being our most needy are given the opportunity to learn in the same way that they would in any other class. It's a superior model to those that pull students with special needs out of mainstream classes and don't support their needs. So that's a little bit about the ICT model. What we have right now is we have a gap in a number of our, in a content area in each of our grade levels, and this would fill that gap. It would provide continuity across those content areas for our students. They would have similar levels of support across the content areas, whether that be science, math, social studies, or English. And it would promote, again, the success of all the students in those classes. The last thing I'll say about this, and before Mr. Cohen kind of talks about his own application for the position at the high school, is there's another factor here. Many of our students, somewhere in just over 70 students at the middle school, receive support through a program called BSP, or the Building Support Program. And that is a class that is a support class that's taught by a special education teacher, but it's a general ed support. It's for all students, whether they be a student who's classified with an IEP or a student with a 504, student that's not classified at all. They're all general education students. All different types of students are in those classes. And those classes really serve 2 purposes. They support the mainstream. They support the content learning that students do. They reinforce, they reteach, they pre-teach, and so forth, as well as supporting students' organizational needs. what happens there, if you observe those classes, is you see a disproportionate amount of class time that needs to be spent supporting one particular content area because there's no ICT model in place to support it in the main classroom. So you might walk into, say, an 8th grade BSP class or a 7th grade BSP class, and you'd see, and this has happened to me recently, you'd see more often than any other content area, science being taught or pre-taught or retaught or what have you, because the students who have those organizational needs or have those additional learning needs need that reinforcement and need that content broken down in a way that's not possible for them in a class where there's only one teacher, and science in those cases feels really different for them because they're used to having that level of support in all their other content areas. So I feel like there is a ripple effect. There's an effect on all students in the class that currently is not supported by the ICT model, but there is a ripple effect in our other support classes that we see that needs to be supported as well, and I think needs to be acknowledged. So with that.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, David. And, again, very well said. And again, thank you to the board. I stand in front of you tonight with some really critical and important asks, I think, for the high school level as well, and starting with the continuation of this concept of special education. I think it's really important to start off by saying we also need another special ed teacher at the high school. Some similar themes, and I'll be able to speak to that with what David had talked about, but I think the entry point is a little different, and I'll start really by just talking about some sheer numbers. And at the high school level, we're currently running 11 resource room classes, support classes for students with IEPs, and we're capped at 5 per class. And currently, we are filling 50 of those 55 seats. Another way that we support our students with IEPs is to run academic support classes. And we're now at a point where we're averaging 12 students per class in those settings. And these numbers are very high and they're very limiting. And what it means is that we have very limited flexibility in how to best serve the needs of our students in that capacity. So one of the things that Deb and I have talked about and that we feel is really important at the high school level is to try to schedule and arrange our students by grade level to allow our teachers to be real specialists, and also to make sure that their communication with the content teachers are really strong. When we have numbers like 50 out of 55 seats being filled, and when we start to see our average numbers in academic support rise to 12 per class, the ability to maintain that flexibility and maintain those strong lines of communication directly to the content teacher start to become very limited. And that starts to have a broader impact. And what the impact is that it's harder to make sure that we're providing access to more rigorous content areas for our IEP students. And many of them are very capable, but when that flexibility is limited, sometimes their support classes become more essential in the scheduling process than the ability to give them a singular honors class that might be available at the same time. So the ability to have another teacher at the school would give us greater flexibility. It would also give us a broader ability to support the entire curriculum. I know David did a great job of saying that supporting our students with IEPs is not just about purely what takes place at that level, but it's also about raising the level of performance and rigor across the board. As our IEP students are better supported and better able to perform in all classrooms, what we then see is raising of standards across all classrooms. And it's something that we're very focused on and realize is really important at the high school. The last piece of that is just the trends and seeing the growing trends at the high school. We currently have the largest number of IEP students in the district at the high school with, I think it's just over 80 students with IEPs, and we also have a large number of students with 504s. And we actually, from a ratio standpoint, as well as from a sheer numbers standpoint, have some of the smaller numbers of teachers in the district. And the numbers are just not adding up. And as we continue to see a rise in IEPs and IEP students at the high school, from a pure compliance standpoint, I'm starting to be concerned about our ability to meet the base of needs. But then when you go back to what I talked about previously, I fear that it doesn't fit the model of what we really want and how we best want to support the program overall, both, again, for students with IEPs, but for all learning. So That's really the purity of talking about a teacher and the need for a special ed teacher. It really goes to the next ask that we've had at the high school level, which is for a chairperson. And I've had a lot of time, Deb and I, to speak about this and to really understand this need. And it's interesting, we have a lot of departments with instructional leaders and department chairs, and in many ways, not only would I argue a need for us to have one in special education, I might argue that it's one of the most critical areas that we have, because it's one of those crossover points. And as I started to talk about with the need for a special education teacher, an instructional leader in special education is not only about being able to coordinate services, doing a better job of making sure that we're consistent in our approach from grade level to grade level and from student need to student need, but it's also really understanding that purity of instruction. And now we're talking about the communication piece of instructional leadership and the ability for our special ed department to make sure that they're effectively communicating with our content areas. And that's a very comprehensive step. So while we can start to address that from a scheduling standpoint, there are many layers beyond that. And we host now at the high school bi-weekly instructional leader meetings. And one of the voices that we don't have in the room is the voice of special education. And it's a critical voice. It's a voice that needs to be heard, and it's a support that needs to be stated as we're making decisions around things like our honor selection process, how we schedule our students in the courses that we're selecting, as well as the purity of talking about instruction. One of the things that we've been focused on as a district is curriculum mapping. And we had a superintendent's conference day recently where we were focused really on that for the great part of the day. And for the first time, we were able to bring our special education teachers together as a singular group to start talking about how to map their curriculum around things like resource room and academic support. And the need to have a strong leadership voice in that room presented itself as essential. So there are just a whole host of reasons why we feel that it's lacking and it's missing. And again, I'd be certainly at a loss if I didn't say that that would be a 6 to 12 chairperson. And for the same things that David Sotal talks about and the needs at the middle school in terms of teacher support, that leadership support I think is critical in how it rotates through both programs. So again, a really important and essential ask that I stand in front of you and put out there tonight. Another ask at the high school is to restore an occupational ed funding source for high school students. I know when Dr. Harrison has talked about it, it's a small ask in terms of number of students, but I think it's a really important one. And it's an area that we lack right now. There are, fortunately, a small number of students in our district that require an alternative pathway. But that being said, there are students that would benefit greatly from having access to an alternative pathway. So sometimes we see students that through a traditional course offerings that we have in the high school, it doesn't support what they need. And sometimes it's a more hands-on layer of learning, whether it's through a cosmetology program or an automotive program or a culinary program. And there's a host of different OC-Ed programs that they can choose from. We have students that would benefit greatly from having that option. And again, fortunately, it's not a lot, but my fear is that when we don't offer it, we're limiting potentially the pathway to a high school diploma for a very select number of our students. And the ability to use that as motivation, both in the first 2 years of their high school experience where they would not yet have access to that program, as well as then what their experience would be like once they could and potentially would gain access to an OC-Ed program where they're learning how to manage their day in 2 different settings, both here in Irvington and then off at the occupational ed site, is a really important way for students to be able to develop in a critical need. So I ask that you really consider that and understand that right now not offering that for our students is, I think, creating a gap. Another ask that we have is for a 0.5 FTE of a psychologist. I mentioned before that the special ed and 504 numbers at the high school are the largest in the district. And with 80 IEPs, we have a school psychologist. that is being limited in the ability to resource and provide those levels of support to all of our students. And there are multiple layers that impacts. One is just the purity of being able to manage the IEP process and annual reviews and being able to make sure that there's appropriate communication with parents and all of the needs around that area. But it goes beyond that. It's the behind-the-scenes work. It's the ability then to make sure that the group counseling and the individual counseling is not only able to be followed through on a regular basis and on an appropriate basis, but it's the ability to find time to nuance and to recognize when our students may need a little extra support. One of the things and one of the areas that we've seen, and we talked about a number of weeks ago when we met with you, is the alarming and great number of students that are non-classified that we're finding in crisis. And unfortunately, somewhat on a regular basis at the high school. The amount of stress that our teenagers are currently experiencing is at an all-time high, and it's not just here in Irvington. If you read reports, you'll see that it's an unfortunate phenomenon, not only throughout Westchester, but certainly throughout the country. And we're growingly concerned about our teenagers and the ability to best support them. And unfortunately, some of the risky behaviors that they turn to when they start to self-medicate or support themselves. So the ability to have an extra 0.5 FTE of a psychologist would certainly meet that need. And once again, just finally better help us coordinate some of the additional layers of support that we're creating at the school, our regular IST meetings, and our various levels of building support. So again, I feel like I'm coming to you consistently tonight telling you that I fear that we're at a threshold, and without these asks being put out there, I'm worried. I'm worried about our ability to best support our students. And then finally, but certainly not least, a really critical and important need that, again, I know we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, and that's an additional clerical support at the high school. I know Raina and Chris spoke to you about research that was done about the number of clerical supports at Westchester high schools, and quite frankly, the number was alarming when I saw it. And we are clearly well below the norm of most high schools throughout Westchester, where the number typically was 7 or more in nearly every high school we were looking at. And currently at the high school, we have 3 clerical support people. So what does that mean? It means that we're being taxed in so many ways. And ultimately, on a simple level, our clerical staff is being taxed, and it's inhibiting their ability to best provide customer support to the community and to our parents and to our students on a daily basis. But I think the issue goes much deeper than that. And I think it starts to talk about how Deb and myself as administrators and our guidance counselors on a regular basis are taking on the work that normally a clerical staff person would be able to endure. So some of that can include day-to-day attendance. It can include things like transcript and grade reporting processes, and it can include regular communications and the way to outreach to parents. And the ability to add a clerical staff person at the high school would allow us to all do a much better job of that. So specifically for Deb and myself, another clerical staff member would allow us to spend more time directly working with teachers around instruction. It would allow us to be able to spend more time with students around building culture and community and spirit, things that we feel are really critical and core at the high school. And finally, it would allow us to provide more time communicating with parents, an essential need in building those partnerships as well. For our guidance counselors, the ability to bring on another clerical staff member would provide our guidance counselors with more opportunity to spend time with their students, to be working as a team around developing and building upon the college process and the work that we're already starting to do, but actually being able to carve out more time to do that. And as I mentioned before, just the purity of our clerical staff as well, being able to better meet their individual daily needs and for us to provide better community service or better outreach and customer support to the community. So it's a lot of asks. I appreciate you listening, and I thank you.
Great. Thank you all. Through this initiative, we are also seeing that we're working to be able to sustain programs, not asking for a lot at this point in time related to arts, music, and athletics, but Mr. McCormick did have a few modest requests that I think you could just quickly throw your voice to before we move on.
I'll be quick. Couple of items that are big, a little big ticket item, pole vault pit. Our pole vault pit is over 25 years old. I think it's probably older than that, but that's as far back as Chris Barry could remember. There's a piece of tape up on top of the wall there. A few years ago, we had a kid pole vault over 17 feet, 3 inches, and won the state championship. So if you can imagine falling from that spot, you want a nice, soft, new pit for safety. Our pit is very near the end. So we have 138 kids involved in the track program this year between high school and middle school. Many of those kids will participate not only in running events but in the field events. We've had kids go on to get college scholarships. Those guys went to UCLA. So it's a great opportunity. It helps our team. We have a rich tradition in track and field. So it's a must. We host big events. We're not going to be able to host that event if we continue with our current facility. The other ones are field hockey goals and soccer goals. We move those goals around all the time. We're playing on different fields. They get a lot of wear and tear. So two of the equipment items are goals just to keep our programs up and running so we meet the safety concerns of officials and other teams. And then the other item is apparel. We're really interested in getting our coaches identifiable for safety reasons, for their games. Officials, spectators, players, all can identify them. It's something the coaches really want. They want to have a little school pride in what they wear, show the kids that they are invested in their teams, and it's something they're looking forward to. So anytime we can get them, right now they're having to buy their own things. If I can press upon them to look good when they're coaching, I think it sends a great message to our teams and our fans.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So as we shift, if you remember our 3 themes, first student opportunities and thinking about the investment in our facilities, we have a lot of items that are necessary. When we think of the maintenance of our facilities, there are things that are reoccurring. So we think preventive maintenance, regular services, but then Gary working with his staff and then collaborating with all the administrators, identify what those pressing needs are. And we have a litany of things that we discussed going back a couple meetings ago, but really just to try to highlight where we're going and looking at projects that are repairing and upgrading, and that includes things like necessary electrical upgrades. There's areas where we just simply have to add more outlets to meet needs. Lighting replacements where there's state code and requirements that you have to replace lights that are of a certain age because of energy efficiency. We have a painting initiative that Gary started a couple years ago, so we're continuing with that, painting classrooms and hallways. We have the ceilings, for example, at Main Street School, when you go on the stairwells, where you literally have ceiling tiles that are falling, and we just can't glue them up anymore because the plaster behind it is crumbling. So we have to rip that down. We have window shades that need to be replaced. We have door locks that don't work effectively in schools. But then we're looking at maintenance items. So that's looking at items like paving project, rebuilding the loading dock here at the campus, which is crumbling, sidewalk repair where we have sidewalks that are failing. We need new snow removal equipment. Our salt spreader's on its last leg and needs to be replaced. And we need to repave some other walkways. So there's lots of work, and these are things that Gary and his crew try to address the best they can, but these are things that certainly go beyond the day-to-day work that they can do. And then, of course, still included in the budget is looking at large-scale initiatives, creating some needed office space in this building where we don't have enough room for folks in Mr. Lubinsky's office and Artie, which we know are both working in essentially closets at this point in time. And then the remodeling of a high school bathroom, as we've talked about in the past. So when we think about that third theme, we talked about planning for the future, and a conversation that we've touched on at the last meeting. And we think about where we are, talking about facility repair, facility maintenance, and some of those projects can get costly. So just the list of things that I referenced before, some of them range from a couple $1,000s to others being $80,000, $50,000. Think back to October 7th when we asked the community to support a bond proposal where we were looking to borrow and finance $4.6 million to be able to address needs. It's very common in school districts to essentially have a savings account for this kind of purpose, to be able to address facility needs, construction needs that the district is going to have to tackle. So it could be a massive repaving project. It could be a replacement of boilers. It could be the replacement of an artificial turf field in 12 years when a carpet needs to be replaced. Creating a capital reserve fund needs authorization by the Board of Education to be able to place a proposition on the ballot on May 19th. And in doing so, if that is approved by the voters, once the district looks to have a need to be able to withdraw from that account. So let's say that we need to replace a series of boilers. Let's say we need to perform a major renovation on a particular facility. We can, rather than hitting our general fund severely, rather than going out to the voters for a bond, we can withdraw funds from this account. It's not going to be incurring new debt as a bond would. Very, very commonplace when we look to a lot of our neighboring school districts when they go out for bond referendums. You can see percentages of that work being supported by a capital reserve fund. So again, it needs to be approved by the board, and we'd ask that you'd consider that tonight. Then it needs to be approved by the voters to generate it. Once it's in place, the board has that opportunity to deposit money on an annual basis, whether that's budgeted or if there's money to be allocated from fund balance at the end of a particular school year. Then when an appropriate need has been identified with board approval, we can go before the voters to ask for their consent to be able to utilize these funds to be able to support those needs. So when we think about where we are, we've talked about student opportunity, we've talked about maintaining our facilities, we've thought about the future a little bit, but along the way we've had to make some decisions. As you can imagine, we had a big long list of things before we ever came to start talking to you back on January 27th, and we made a lot of difficult decisions. But since our last meeting a couple weeks ago, we've made a few adjustments, and fortunate for us, they haven't been that painful. And in doing so, we've removed a couple things from the budget. Knowing that the construction project that is going to be delayed and the construction of Mazzaro's is not likely going to happen until next year, we're proposing removing the shed that we are going to need to construct to save $20,000. Since the last meeting, we've identified opportunities for savings within our special education tuition lines. We had one student that was in an out-of-district placement that has just relocated. And then we had another particular child that was in a BOCES program that is no longer attending. And you can see one saves $57,000, another $81,000. As I referenced earlier this evening, we're going to have our bond sale tomorrow, and we'll be able to get some more accurate numbers. But the latest guidance that Beverly has received from bond counsel based upon where they see us shaking out in the market is that there's a net savings that they're estimating over their original projections of about $31,000. So we'd be paying an additional $40,000 in principal, but that's offset by a savings of $71,000 in interest that we would not have to pay. So since the last meeting, we have adjustments that have resulted in $189,000. And we can see the new budget total at $57,954,000, which represents a 2.95% increase. So I know it's one of those things when anticipation starts to build when you get to these points and discussions. But looking at where we are seeing a tax rate increase of 4.36%. But there's a story to be told there that Beverly's going to explain to us. But the number that's underlined there is another story to look at in itself. What I come to the board with tonight is a budget that's $23,500 under the cap. And we say that with a lot of challenges that we've dealt with. We say that with uncertainty before us. We're knowing some things are going to fluctuate. The one thing to consider here is that we do not know if we're going to get more state aid. We're essentially budgeting flat state aid. Most people are going to tell you that we're going to receive additional aid. So let's say the legislature comes up with a budget in the next week, and they turn and tell Irvington, you have $100,000 more than you were projecting. There's another conversation that we need to have. Is that an opportunity to consider looking at things differently? Is that a consideration to do more, or is that a consideration for us to have additional savings within the tax? So Bev is going to walk us through some of the related finances quickly, and then we'll be a point to discussion before you know it. So, Bev, revenues?
Thank you. We've reviewed this before at the last few board meetings, so I'm going to just give a quick summary. This is the projected revenue. The property taxes and pilots are up about 2.99%. State aid, right now, we're projecting flat. It's a negative 2.8% because as of the last notification that we received from the state, they were going to reduce the building aid interest. The dormitory authority has the authorization to reduce it and analyze it once every 10 years. I'm hoping that that will change because one of the houses, either the Senate or the Assembly, has recommended that that change not be put in place this year, which would then help us by about $90,000. Tuition is for our students that are paying tuition for this district. Sales tax we receive. BOCES rental on classrooms that are rented in our buildings. And other is basically reimbursements for JCOS, John Cardinal, health services, Medicaid reimbursements, etc. So all of that is about a 2.97% increase. When you add our appropriated fund balance, it comes to a 2.95% increase in the budget. The expenses, to summarize, salaries are all contractual, 4.99% overall, and that includes just not salary increases for existing positions, but that also includes the new positions that we are asking for. Benefits, you'll notice, that have gone down, and that's basically attributable to the reduction in the pension costs. Other expenses are about 9%. Debt service also is going down due to bond refundings. We did one in 2013. It impacted this budget also, and with the one that's going out tomorrow, that will also show that negative. Transportation is going up about 1.4%, and utilities are almost flat. So overall, the budget is 2.95%. The tax cap, and I want to emphasize that hopefully it's going to stay at this level, but it could change, it could fluctuate depending upon state aid when it comes in. Because state aid is impacted on the tax cap calculation as a reduction under the exemptions. The exemptions are basically your capital debt, and the offset would be your building aid. So we have to wait and see how that comes out. But right now, our tax levy max is $51,351,575, or a 3.08% increase over last year's tax cap. So this is a summary of the proposed budget. Each one of these line items have been presented in the last two board meetings, and anyone who did not see the detail is welcome to review it on our website. They are posted there. So the new budget considerations were 1.2 million, and push-ahead budget, there was 457,000. So the total change in overall budget is 1.6 million, or that 2.95%. Based on that budget, we've estimated, and it's a very fluid figure, it's always estimated until we get the actual final assessments. Right now, we're projecting a about $695 rate per thousand. That translates into individual homeowners' tax bills. If it had an average home that's assessed at about 700,000, that would be a $720 increase per year. This is where it gets interesting. The tax rate, when you calculate the tax rate, you take your total levy and you divide it into your assessed values to get your rate per thousand. If we had used the assessments that we're calculating last summer, if everything had remained neutral, our tax rate would have been $684.76, or a 2.92% increase. That's what we have responsibility for, 2.92% of the tax rate. In reality, we're projecting a 4.36% increase because if you'll notice, it's over a billion decrease in assessed values this year due to settled tax certs. So the difference between the 4.36% actual estimated tax increase and the 2.92% is actually increase that we have no control over. It's due to tax settlements.
I think that's an important story to tell. So when we think about that, recognize taxation is taxation. Everybody's dollars are significant and absolutely valuable, and we don't take that lightly. But I think the point that Beverly makes is one that's important to be on record in stating that when we look at the actual activity specifically within our school district budget, we're seeing a rate that is much lower. Unfortunately, because of the adjustment in the assessed value in the community, we're seeing a greater burden being put on our residents. Interesting though, when you take a look at our trends over recent years, so you can kind of look back and see where our percent budget increases have been since 11-12, and looking at the increases in the tax rate as well. And we're looking at a budget increase, 2.95%, which is certainly good news compared to some of the two past years that we've seen. But interesting, just kind of put that number in the back of your mind, that we're looking at a 2.92% number, and how that would have played out, the tax rate increase that we would have been looking at the lowest rate over the past 5-6 years. You know, it just certainly a little editorializing here, but something I think that's worth noting. So we've presented a budget that I got to tell you, I'm excited about. As I talk to people in the community, whether it's been at events, IEF once again on Saturday night, events at schools, there seems to have been a lot of enthusiasm and excitement from parents, certainly enthusiasm from our staff, and looking at the opportunities that we're providing for our children and how we're investing in our facilities in our future. It's dialogue that I think is, as I said, is going to be challenging, but I think if we step back and think about where we are in the position that we're in, I think we should enjoy this chatter. I think we should enjoy what we're talking about, because it's all about preparing our students for a bright future. So tonight we want to have that dialogue, answer questions that we can answer for you. We would like to see a determination on the capital fund moving forward, because we would need that information to start preparing for the vote on May 19th. And I'm going to ask the board for direction. Certainly want to hear your opinions and thoughts about some of the considerations, but most importantly, a targeted tax rate would help us be able to prepare for that next meeting on the 9th. And then this dialogue is going to continue. We have another meeting on the 9th. We have a meeting that shortly follows thereafter on the following Tuesday, and looking to then have the board adopt the budget on the 21st of April. So we have this evening and 2 more meetings to get down to all the dirty details. But at the end of the day, I'm confident that working together, we're going to develop a tremendous budget that's going to be a tool to really serve our students and community well. Just for board resource tonight, I've listed the different considerations by building. The first set of them focuses on everything that we've talked about. So it includes maintenance, it includes the curricular type initiatives. So you can see how that's categorized by building and by dollars being spent. And then I've also broken it down, looking more specifically to some of the other categories. And then finally, we have a number of opportunities for public discussion and dialogue certainly the conversations that we're going to have in the very near future. But then after the board adopts it, I certainly look forward to chatting with the community to educate them on what the board has approved for this year. So, Mr. Whitney, it's in the board's hands now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. Thank you, Ms. Miller, again for your very thorough and detailed work. We really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure having you here in the district, and the 4 years that I've been working with you every year has been a very clear budget, so thank you again. So I think pivoting to us in our discussion, what I thought we would do first is do a quick round of questions just to clarify anything that is not clear. I mean, I noted your question that I cut you off on, which was the, you wanted the data on the AIS history, I think you were starting to ask.
Yeah, no, but I guess my one thought for process, and see how you guys feel, is I think maybe it would be best if, instead of going person by person, we did category by category. Because like if I'm asking questions about the middle school, if anyone else has questions on the middle, it might make sense to do it like that. I don't know what you think. In other words, like if one person's asking a question on a topic, it might make sense for everybody to, if they have similar questions on that same, their questions on that same topic, to do it at that point,
It's a
or
little,
no?
I think it's a little messy jumping around, so
Okay.
I would just say let's go down and do quick questions, and then we'll get comments and feedback in terms of what our opinion is about the.
So first question.
Yeah, just first, like, get the factual is, you know, I have a bunch, but I'll start with you, Maria, with some questions,
Sure.
unless you want me to go with mine
No,
first.
no, that's fine. David and Dave, the ICT model at the high school, middle school, is it true for the high school it's support in English and in the middle school, social studies and science? Can you just speak to who exactly, what subject matters this is?
So in the middle school, the gap exists in science at grades 7 and 8, and in social studies, grade 6. So we would be looking to fill all of those gaps. That might mean some reconfiguration of existing staff combined with the new staff person, depending on expertise and other things. So how and who right now is not exactly nailed down, but those would be the gaps that needed to be filled, yeah.
And is there an existing special education teacher in the middle school for ICT?
Yeah, so there are ICT teachers at each grade level,
Right.
but the current staffing level does not provide enough staff, essentially, to
How
cover
many-
all those areas.
How many existing?
We have 2 at each grade level.
2 at each grade.
Yeah,
So 6 altogether?
correct.
So this would make it,
This would make it 7, correct.
make it 8, okay.
So at the high school, it's not as easily defined by subject area. Our ICT class is usually aligned around when students are going to be sitting for Regents exams. So we currently offer in biology ICT classes. We have for Global 2, the second year of Global Studies. We were able to add for American Studies this year, although that hasn't always existed. And we also have for, let me just check my list, we've had for 11th grade English, as well as 9th grade English as an entry point.
So where do you see this fitting?
So, I mean, I think that it provides us with potential great opportunities of greater continuum of instruction. So we provide it at the second year of Global, but not at the first, and I think the 9th grade entry point is a really important place. We also could really look at our mathematics model and see if there's a need to better support students in the classroom through that as well.
So currently, there's no ICT models in the math classes at the middle school, at the high school, sorry.
No, I mean, one of the supports that we can provide for mathematics at the high school level is to offer algebra as a 2-year curriculum rather than a 1-year. So often the support is absorbed that way.
Okay, thank you. Joyce, my question is about world language. I love the idea of adding world language, but I'm still not exactly understanding how, based on your description and the information we've gotten, how is it different than what was delivered in the past?
think it'll be in the design of the course.
Joyce, can you go to the mic, please?
So I think it will be, I know it will be, based on the design of the course. And so depending on the staffing of the position and how we're able to sit and design. I know Dr. Cora and myself, we sat and had conversations about what the class could look like. And so I think the perspective, I think having the global citizenship perspective is a new layer that we may not, I can't speak what it was in the past because I wasn't a part of it and I wasn't there. But I can speak for the experiences that we're trying to develop at Main Street School now and how they will foster and connect to what happens for students as they head into world language in 6th through 12th grade. And so the idea is at Main Street School, we're focused on students' academic needs, their social emotional. We do a lot of character building work at the elementary school level. And so there is that connect that's possible through a world language class to give kids a lens into not just their own culture and perspective, but world cultures and world perspectives. And so I use French and Spanish as the rooting for the language because it connects with the languages we have that are currently being offered. But I do think a different component is that we want to also incorporate other languages and other cultural perspectives as part of this class. And so while the teachers' focus will be French and Spanish in some ways because of the certification, we are looking at what other cultures will be incorporated.
Okay. Thank you. And then just a quick question. I see that the shed for Ms. Zaros was removed. The gator for the field is still in there. Is there a reason why that's still in there and wasn't removed?
Yeah, there's still need. So the gator would have been used, just the gator is a utility, John Deere utility vehicle. Initially, we were saying the need was specifically for grooming the artificial turf, which would be done by our maintenance staff on a regular basis. However, it's used for multiple purposes, for athletics, for our athletic trainer, for setup athletic facilities. It's used by our custodial maintenance staff for getting around the campus. And the golf cart that we're using, I think we joked that when they're driving it, that Mr. McCormick is bringing supplies out to the field and kids are walking past him as it's at the end of its life.
Okay. Those are my top.
Get the kids to carry the supplies.
Yeah. I just enjoy that visual.
Now, I'll keep it brief with the hour, but I understand the various asks, and thanks very much to the administration and all of the principals for explaining all of the various asks. I mean, overall, I'm still concerned about an overall tax rate. You're right, we can't do anything about the overall assessment. I'm going to
Ask questions? Okay.
Question. I'm concerned about the overall tax rate of being over 4%, but the one question I have, and we'll get back to that, but the one question I have that didn't make sense is if we're planning on breaking ground in a year on a new field that we've just got a bond pass for, why would we pay for the new pit for the thing now?
It's not a pit.
Does that make sense, or?
It makes sense in the sense that we will be able to use what we have now next year, whether we have a new field or not.
Just because, it's not a pit per se, it's a big cushion.
No, but I guess does that so it's the big blow, the thing that's like, oh, okay, it's not the dirt pit. I thought you mentioned the dirt pit. You know, it's the big pad.
Big crash pad.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I
I'm
went
sorry.
through this question several meetings ago.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought you actually meant the pit, which didn't strike me as well.
The word pit sort of throws you.
Sorry.
That question was so hard, he had to leave after that. Robin, it has moved to you quickly.
I'll try quickly.
No, I didn't mean you had to be quickly, I just meant we had gotten to you
Okay.
quickly.
A couple general budget questions. Fund balance is in there again, but we haven't really talked about that. Last year, you felt comfortable that we had an excess in fund balance, so it wouldn't be taking money out of somewhere else in order to fund the fund balance. So what is the outlook this year for fund balance in terms of our budget?
The same.
Okay. How much over do we think we're gonna 455,000 of it? Or will we have more money in addition to that? And-
Yes, I believe it'll be
Okay.
more than that.
Okay, so in terms of AIS, yeah, I guess my ask was in general, I don't know, but I guess it would be interesting for me to see kind of historically the number of students that are receiving AIS services. I realize there's a lot of factors, so it's not comparing apples to apples clearly, but I still think it's interesting to take a look at. The numbers seem just to keep going up and up and up, and maybe that's wrong, it just seems the perspective, so. Okay, 1 second. A question, Joyce, on the global citizenship piece that you described, some of it starts to sound to me like it crosses into like social studies. Is there an overlap there? Is there gonna be some of it taught by the general ed teacher, the general teacher in social studies?
Well, so I think that there, right now, I'll give you just some sort of the work that we're doing at the school now that sort of lends itself to this kind of conversation. So the types of texts that teachers were using for their read alouds, are taking place in other parts of the world. They're looking for texts that have storylines with characters of other cultures and other perspectives. Our park parents has reading partner night. We've selected 4 books that all take place in other parts around the world. So that's like a literature connect. We're doing a hike for hunger. So the organizations that we're supporting are local, they're national, and they're international. And so we're having conversations with kids. We have a character building assembly on Friday where the kids will be introduced to this idea of global citizenship as a school. Right now it's been happening at the classroom level with their teachers, and teachers are involved in different ways. They've gone to workshops, we've had conversations, a group of us are reading a book. There's all sorts of learning and things happening at the school. And so the idea of this class is to have a class in the student's day that is through the lens of language, because language and culture provide a different perspective than what would happen in a social studies classroom or what happened in the ELA lesson. We're looking to make the connects as a building under a bigger umbrella of global citizenship, connected to what we're doing with habits of mind, connected to what we're doing with character building framework, and all the work the district's been doing with the theory of action, the goals and theories of action around the disposition work. But I could see a relationship with the library media specialist in terms of resources and support in some way, but I really do see it as the lens is through the language and the culture is really, it's a different lens.
Okay. And just to clarify for me, is this going to replace the library media special, or how is the time for this class going to come?
So for 5th grade, this would be for 5th grade, they would lose their library special. The teachers would set up partner time with them to work on the integration of library media with the research in the content area, which I believe, and Raina could speak to that in the past, there have been experiences where she did have a different, the library media special schedule was structured in a different way, where she was able to support teachers. Right now she is a special, so she's locked into a certain number of periods. So this would free her up to have her partner in different ways and do different projects with the teachers. So the 5th grade students would have this as a special every week instead of their library special. They would get library in other ways.
But would they be losing instructional time to put library into the classroom?
No, because the library media special would now be partnering and integrating with the teachers. So she might co-teach, she might integrate, they would, the kids would go to the library and they would partner. There's a lot more partner, similar to our technology, how the teachers partner and go to the lab with our technology teacher while she's in our building, and then the teachers do it when she's not in the building, sort of in a similar model like that.
Okay, and then and just refresh my memory in terms of the special then, how many hours a week, or how does that work in terms of time they would receive this class? I don't remember how long the special is in Main Street School.
45 minutes.
45 minutes a week.
Once a weekday weekend.
That's what I thought, okay. Okay, thank you. Question for the middle school, the AIS model, where's David? I'm just wondering if you've thought through this, you might not have, but when you're envisioning this position, do you envision that this person would be 100% like ICT in the subject areas, or do you think maybe between the whole staff, some will have VSP, some will do IST, and they'll kind of be evenly divided?
So it's a good question. I think there's a number of ways that we can go. Part of that might be determined ultimately by the pool and the candidate that we get.
Makes sense.
the needs that exist add up to a full-time staff person. So we wouldn't be adding any additional AIS. The question would be, would we be looking to kind of swap out someone from one of their AIS assignments to do more ICT work, and then putting that. And I really, it's hard to say right now. Right now, our model is such that our grade level teams are divided by the 2 special ed teachers on each grade level to kind of divide up the students and meet their needs in that way. Because this person is likely to cross grade levels, my initial instinct is that they probably won't be providing additional support outside of the ICT model, but that could change based upon the personnel.
Okay, thanks. More questions. I'm going school by school. A question for you on, there's a lot of kind of special ed ads that, in the asks. And I guess I'm just wondering, because I know it's come up before, that there's also an overload perhaps for the study skills person and very big caseload, same thing as the psychologist. Is any of these asks going to help alleviate that, or is that just completely different?
I think it's a great question. I think I started to touch upon it before, but as you bring it up, Robin, certainly when we talk about the special ed teacher that we're asking for, and when I mentioned the numbers in our resource room and in our academic support classes, I think we're talking about the same thing. One of the things that I didn't bring up before is just the work around for our students around executive functioning skills and their organizational skills, which isn't necessarily, we have many students that need support in that way, and it's not about their cognitive level. These are students that can perform at incredibly high levels in our high school. And by adding more and more strategic resource room and academic support classes, we can better support that. And when I was alluding before to being able to raise the level of rigor in all of our classes, that's really the connection that I'm making there.
So this will help alleviate the caseload?
Oh, absolutely.
That person as well as...
Most definitely.
Okay, thanks. Question, and you also made a comment, which was funny, I had this question before, but the occupational education, roughly, you said it's a small number of students that it's going to affect.
Well, I know when Chris presented the budget number would be for 2 students. So, it's a small number of students, but it's a significant need. So, we've already identified a profile of student. And again, it's not a large number of students at the high school, but it's a unique and important need, and right now it's one that can't be met without the funding.
Okay, thanks. Almost done. Chris, a question on the paving of the parking lot, just so I'm clear. Is this the upper level parking lot that you're going to pave?
The lot that's adjacent to the theater.
Oh, so we're repaving. We're not
Repaving is
paving the upper.
correct.
Okay,
No,
I
no.
was confused about that.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. And then I guess an ask that I had a couple asks last time, but it's hard for me to look at these numbers and not understand kind of where we are today versus what we actually spent, plus what projected are. When we're comparing budget to budget, if you're saying that we're significantly under budget at the end of the year, then looking at an increase from budget to budget is not exactly telling the whole story to me. So I said before, it'd be interesting to see our actuals to budget. Instead of comparing our budget for this year, I'd like to see, kind of our actuals plus projected for the end of the year. So I see kind of really where we think we are this year, and then what the increase is. It's a different look at. It's pretty common to see that when you're looking at numbers. I mean, I think I've asked for this before. Jim Reese, we used to ask him for it. He used to give us that as well. It's looking at budget to actuals instead of budget to budget.
You wouldn't have the actuals for this year, though.
Well, you have the actuals to date, and then you just use the estimate for the rest of the year. I'll give you an example. We didn't hire the data person until mid-year. So when you're looking at, a budget-to-budget increase, really, that the increase in that line should be a little higher because it's going to be a full year next year. It was only a half year this year. I mean, it's hard to look at an increase when certain things were completely taken out, and you're not comparing apples to apples.
Just a question for clarity, do you want because, going back and doing all of the codes would be an enormous amount of work. right, for Bev.
It's
So which-
basically the push-ahead budget.
But, well, can I just finish my
Well,
question?
isn't there
So,
a
I
run
mean, I'm just
rate
wondering,
of
which of
actuals?
these ones would you, which of these schedules would you want to see sort of year-to-date expenditure on?
I'll look through and tell you. I mean, to me, it seems like what I would say is just give me a run kind of the key categories, not the detail of just actuals, like where we are today. And then actually, frankly, if you do that, I could probably just go on the budget and just estimate I would just take a pure estimate for the rest of the year based on what.
So this would be like page 16 maybe, is what you're thinking?
It's really not that much.
Well, we have all the actuals.
Have the
The
actuals.
actuals plus encumbrance, it would probably be easy to do because it's already in your system.
Yeah, I mean, can't we just see that?
But that wouldn't
Right,
necessarily be the
it
projection for the whole
It doesn't give
year.
you an accurate projection because, for example, like the pensions, we don't actually post any of that until they actually are accrued at the end of the year, for example, teachers. So right now, you're going to see the entire teacher's pension
Okay.
complete.
Right, okay, so
And
I guess
unexpended.
then, to make it easy, because I could figure out the rest based on last year's budget, if you want to just give me a run of just key categories, even like page 16, actuals. Just why don't we start with that?
Do you mean actuals for
Or
last
year-
year or year?
Actuals to date, no, this year.
Year to date.
Just to date, just to
Right.
now. And leave it at that, and then I could actually just go in and pull up the budget. And I guess I wouldn't mind also the same number, like the budget to date and the actual to date. If you could give me those two numbers, and then I could finish the rest, if that's easy.
I can run one report and I will scan it and email it to you and you tell me if that's what you want.
Okay, I mean, I don't want anything to take long, but just kind of want to get an idea as to where we are actuals, and then I can figure out the rest.
A specific report and I will email it to you and you, if that's okay,
Okay,
all right?
that would be great. I think I also, okay. Just thinking, I think we also talked about one of my asks at our last meeting, which didn't come up yet, is the, looking at the substitute time to try to get a sense as to, what?
Teacher time.
Right.
Yeah, so if we could get that, that would help too.
Yeah,
then-
and I want to say, I want to be clear, we're not ignoring, as we said, the challenge in
Oh, I
trying to
know,
make
I know.
sense of it. So actually, Raina and I were meeting yesterday morning, going through piles of data, trying to figure how to make sense of it. And actually, Raina is preparing an analysis that'll come by the end of the week,
Thanks.
so.
Yeah, no, I know, I just wanted to.
Yeah, it's been a lot of work.
And then I think I just have one more question, and I mean, I think you guys explained it really well, but I'm just confused with the terminology, is, for Dow's Lane, you call the .8 increase in math an RTI, not AIS. Isn't it kind of interchangeable in terms of language? Okay, okay.
The one thing that I would just add to that does signal a little bit of a shift, and that's one of the reasons why it'll be hard to compare the numbers, is the approach that's taken. So AIS in the past was seen as something that was a support service that students received, and there wasn't the same sort of fluidity
Right,
that
okay.
you now see in the RTI process.
I see what you mean. Okay. I think your turn.
If you think of something else, we can come back.
Yeah, I'm just looking through the rest of my notes. Those are the big
You
things.
can,
but go ahead.
yeah, just tap me on the shoulder if you need more time. But I don't have very much, so you better act quick. So, I just want to go back to Robin's question on the fund balance. Did I hear you say that we will pretty much be at our maximum allowed level for undesignated fund balance?
The 4%, yes.
Whatever that is, yeah, I always forget the number, right. And we'll have extra after this appropriation that will go somewhere else, or no?
For the last few years, we've had some surplus, and if there is anything over the 4%, it goes into the tax tertiary fund,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
which has been getting clobbered.
Yeah, and could you share at some point by email just what the transfers have been, what the transfers have been to that fund the last few years, if you have it?
Okay.
handy, to the tax tertiary fund? This is a great passion of mine, tax tertiary as well. I've always wanted it to be a passion, so now I have one. What, do you have any, still on my passion, do you have any sense of what the demands for payments on tax certs will be next year, or where that money is going to come from?
No, because I don't know what the settlements are. They're still in court. They're still being negotiated.
Yeah, no,
So I have,
if we have sort of similar levels as we've had in the last few years, would we have the money to pay them, or would we need to?
I sincerely hope that we do not have the settlements that we've had this year, because it impacts those lowered assessments and increases your tax rate. So I really hope this was an anomaly.
Okay, but if,
Why don't we just look into it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back to you, rather than having our.
if it needs, right, we all hope that, yeah.
That exposure is huge. They always request 10%
Well, a
of
question
their
of which
value,
properties
so
are
you
coming
can't.
up.
But why don't we come up with a fair
Let's,
estimate?
yeah, let's just, because, okay. My final question is just to sort of, I was looking at the monthly financial report that's attached to one of our consent agenda items. Is it easy or difficult? Is it difficult to produce maybe you have to do it anyway, a budget at that level of detail just for reference? I mean, is that something you do as a matter of course anyway? Or I'm just looking for more, I wonder if just as a reference, you can provide a more granular budget? Or do you prepare a budget at a more granular level than what we're seeing in these?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, is it something you could make available in some way, just?
I can share the same report. Well, I will send it to the whole board, not just Robin, and then everybody can see it and let me know if that satisfies your request. If not, let me know.
Is there any way to do it in a version that's machine readable or text file or something, text or Excel file, as opposed to a scanned?
No, I'll have to scan it because it comes from our finance manager system.
Which just doesn't talk to anything else.
Correct. Yeah.
That's something you should put in the budget. But, those are my only questions. Okay.
Okay, back to me for my questions, I guess. Can you just give me some clarity? I think this is a Bev, Raina, and maybe even a Jesse question, trifecta, about the technology lease and how the Chromebook expenditure impacts the technology lease, because, and maybe I read it wrong, but in the budget there's, I see, right, there's iPads, which is separate than the Chromebooks. So we're buying iPads in addition to Chromebooks, because the Chromebooks are here, 180 Chromebooks.
So one of the conversations that we've been having this afternoon is looking at adjusting that lease. And by doing so the iPads that are specifically mentioned for, I think it's $16,000 are specifically tied to Project Lead the Way at the elementary school.
Right.
So we put that in the budget in this manner. I think we're gonna look to make some adjustments to the lease, that we would move that into the lease figure, but then take the cost of building out the Wi-Fi network and look to try to work that into the Smart Schools grant money that we know the district is gonna receive. The requirements for that are coming out this spring, they're saying. So it would delay the installation a bit because they're saying they're not going to award the grants till the fall. But what that'll allow us to do, one of their objectives is to build out wireless infrastructures. So we'd be able to use grant money for that and thus lower some of the lease costs. So we would be looking to include just specifically devices and smart board replacement and the like within the particular lease.
And why does it have to be iPads, not Chromebooks? Chromebooks are a lot cheaper, aren't they?
No, PLTW, that the program is built around the iPad, though. It's not built
I
around
see. Got it. How did you arrive at 180 Chromebooks?
I don't think they're gonna last 5 years.
I don't know if Jesse, you want to speak to it, but we're looking at trying to, one, put devices out in the schools, but there's also a little bit of math behind it and looking at having, there's a minimum number of devices that you need to be able to test the whole grade at one time. So Jesse, I think it was, Largest grade plus 10%, so we look roughly 150, puts, and then add 10%, 175, 180 rounds out the use of a cart.
So this would be, these Chromebooks, this additional purchase would be targeted at a specific grade?
We're just looking, no, they would be spread out for use across
Right.
the district, understanding that the use would be limited until we have Wi-Fi in every school. But the need would be to be able to, when you had to administer computer-based testing, that you would bring all these devices together, and then you could utilize them, whether you set them up in individual classrooms or a large space, that you could administer, let's say, third grade park assessment all at once as is required, because it's all computer-based. We're estimating 180 machines to be able to do that.
I see, so that's what drives the number, but obviously the utility of the Chromebooks is different than just the testing piece.
Correct.
Got it. And so if we arbitrarily, as the board is sometimes want to do, were to cut the Chromebook allocation from 180 to 90, or we were going to recommend that, the impact would be what? Aside from the inability to do the testing?
Well, so it would interfere with our ability to be able to meet the standards that are being recommended by SED at this point in time, to be park or computer-based test compliant. You know, we're in a position where we have, you know, I want to say even beyond that, when we say 180, that's to hit the minimum requirement. We would love to, we need to exceed that eventually, because you think of the logistics. When we're testing multiple grade levels at a given time. So you think about the logistics of testing, and I can think about my own son's experience, who was taking park last week. Because of limited devices, there was a particular grade level that took the test in the morning, another that took it in the afternoon, and that you were testing kids at all random different times for long periods of time that will disrupt learning in an entire school for an extended time. So that would be a bare minimum. To me, the base that we come back to is that there is a demand from an instructional and a learning standpoint. So I'm saying that from students and teachers to have more access to technology in our schools. We have I don't want to say woeful, but a limited amount of technology available to our kids and teachers as far as devices. So our teachers and our students are calling for these experiences and to utilize them in the classroom as a need. So I would say it would have a negative impact on our ability to integrate technology into student learning.
Okay. How many smart boards, printers, and projectors are we ordering? Printers is, smart boards would be the.
What winds up happening is even after we budget, some come out of circulation, so what we're trying to do is get them as close to end of life as possible, speaking of smart boards. We're currently reaching a point where can you go to the microphone or okay?
Probably go to the mic, please.
I think we spoke about this last time, but with the smart boards, we're reaching end of life on that large cluster of smart boards that we were purchased via the grant we received from Senator Spano. So realistically, we budgeted for approximately between 10 and 20 replacements of those boards. I don't think at this point in time we have any current new installations. I think there might be one that we had discussed as a possibility. We have the flexibility to do that. Projectors, again, tricky number. We budget based on the replacement for the year, but have to leave ourselves with some cushion for additional. It always winds up being that some additional breaks happen or replacements. So I don't have the numbers on the top of my head.
Okay.
I feel like it was close to 20.
So it's 20 for the smart, 10 or 20 for the smart board.
10 for I think it was 10 for the smart boards, 20 for the projectors, and approximately the same for printers.
Right. And Randy and Meg, we still feel that smart boards are an effective way to do teaching in Dow's Lane? I would have been surprised if you didn't say that, right? And I think it's my last question. The $651,000 variance, Bev, in the other category, in that sort of helpful schedule that you did that has salaries broken out, page 14. So that stands out as a big number, both in terms of its absolute amount, 7.8 million, the variance, 651,000, and then the percentage, 9%. And there's a lot of things in there. What are the sort of major things that are in that 651? I would imagine the operation.
All supplies.
Right.
Other expenses, special ed tuitions.
That's probably one of the big items is the
Right.
special ed tuitions, and then the increase in Gary's budget, the 174,000 would be in
Right.
there, right?
Correct. Repairs.
Right. Anything, so the two biggest one would be, and the technology lease, right, because that's 100.
No, because that would come under
Debt service.
debt service.
Oh, that's debt service.
What, I'm sorry, Phil, what's the 174,000?
That's the maintenance budget?
Yes, okay,
Right.
thanks.
So if you kind of, what I was trying to do is eyeball, I think it's page 16, which has all this detail, and I was trying to figure out what could possibly be in the 651, but I guess it's special education is a big number that's, it's,
Tuitions, BOCES.
If we think of special ed tuition alone, we said the kind of the going increase that we've been budgeting for past years has been roughly 8%, which is pretty true to what we've been seeing in a lot of ways. So you think 8% of that money's coming right in tuition.
okay. All right, that's fine. That is it for my questions at the moment.
Can I ask a follow-up to what you were asking?
Sure.
Just with the iPad, what do you guys project for the life of an iPad?
I'm sorry,
Is it the
Robin.
same as the life of a computer, the life of an iPad? Can it last 5 years, or, I don't know.
Yeah.
World language program.
Okay.
Have we had them for 5 years?
There's been a couple of announcements we've had for 5 years, but
Yeah.
we haven't had any major issue with those.
We have certainly for 2 and 3 years.
So we're assuming it's like the same life cycle as a computer?
So far, I mean, they've actually held up better than computers. Computers take a lot more wear and tear.
I actually did have one more question related to world language, Joyce. So in thinking about this program that you're designing and thinking about the world language program as a whole, I guess it's partly the challenge of thinking about this new introduction is what is, just to remind myself, the board and anybody watching, what is our sort of overall objective with world language in the district? Is it fluency when upon graduation, which of course does not apply to Greek or Latin, but, well, there's written fluency. But
I would say so clearly from our experience through the Tri-States World Language Report and the work that we've started to do, yes, I would say clearly fluency is going to be a very clear focus for us, and I think a priority. One of the things, and I just didn't want to interrupt Joyce before, one of the things that I would say that Joyce and I have talked about is the goal in putting in this program in 5th grade is not to reestablish what once was, other than the actual time frame of how it was delivered, which is the once-a-week special, which is how world language was delivered for my 6 years there. It's really to broaden our students' thinking. It's to give them an opportunity to think differently and to open their minds, their hearts, their souls, their eyes to the world. And so Joyce and I talked about, trying to explore opportunities that maybe we could bring someone in at some point and maybe some sort of a module or a unit that exposes kids to Chinese or so in the past, when that language program was implemented, it was thought of as the first year launch to the next 4 years, 3 years in middle school, and then your subsequent years in high school. That's not how we see this program. We see it as a much different, much more global perspective, using language as a tool, a vehicle, an opportunity for our students to be connecting with kids and other people around the world, hearing other languages. So we would want to have the focus on French and Spanish so that we ensure that our students, when they have to make that decision going into 6th grade and they have to pick their language, we certainly want to ensure that we're providing that kind of an exposure to help them make that good choice with their parents. but we really do see the exposure in the course to a far more reaching opportunity for kids.
So the reason why I asked the question about the fluency and the program that you're developing is it doesn't necessarily seem to me, it's not obvious that the class that you're imagining sort of contributes directly to fluency.
Absolutely not.
It-
And it never did, and that's,
Right, so that's correct. Right, obviously, I don't expect people to come out of the class being fluent, but the idea is that how does it lead over time to an increased fluency upon graduation?
I also don't think we've ever really clearly defined what the goals of the language program are.
Well, I
And-
was just taking what Raina said at face value, but
And
yes,
Yeah, but I know we've had the discussion where it hasn't been, we've
Right.
agreed that it hasn't really
the
been
fifth grade
resolved.
program was always a cultural exploration. It was not, it was an introduction to the language. It was, again, it was that first year launch to prepare students to make the decision about French or Spanish in middle school.
And then what is the best practice? Do we have a sense of what best practices are when you're introducing languages at younger, at these younger ages?
It's called kindergarten.
Well, no, I didn't mean, no, I meant in terms of the course that's, in terms of the course that's developed, that's what I meant.
Parents that speak different languages.
We'll certainly be, like, we've already started to explore what resources are out there, what are other places doing, the high schools middle school, high schools working with a language consultant,
Yeah.
currently. And, so just reaching out to see what other schools are doing is giving me some perspective in what it could look like.
What are other schools doing?
A variety of different things, so special, it depends, I guess it's a longer conversation than this right now.
Yes, it is, right.
Yeah.
I guess one last question is, should we be doing more than just one special 45 minutes a week?
I think that's the place that I'm asking to start at, and I think if that's a conversation we wanted to have, again, it's a bigger conversation.
So the idea is we could build from this.
This is an opportunity for us to explore not only expanding world language experience, but looking at doing it in a different way. And there's gonna be a lot of time and effort that Raina and Joyce are gonna have to put into this with teachers to develop the program that they're envisioning right now. It would be premature to say that it's gonna be bigger than this, but is there a prospect of growing these types of experiences? Of course.
Okay, that's it for my questions. Any last lingering questions before we kind of go on to establishing some objectives for Chris and Bev and the administrative team?
When you say objectives, now we're gonna go back and what you had asked us to hold before is
Yeah.
like
Well-
comments about feelings, thoughts,
Comments
priorities.
but ultimately leading to, some sort of sense of what the target is. Are we adding, well, we're not adding because that would take us over the tax cap. Are we subtracting and then adding? Are we trying to hit a target, as Bob suggested initially, under 4%? So on. Just need
And
to-
we'll do capital reserve after?
Pardon me?
Do you wanna do capital reserve after?
Do it.
Yes, definitely. Well, we have to vote on that later anyway.
Okay.
Maria, you want to start? Put you on the hot seat.
Sure, why not? So currently it's 4.36%. I definitely would love to be under 4%. I'm a little hesitant to give exactly a target, a number, because then I think you kind of, I don't know, it's difficult. To me, it seems a little bit, it's a harder conversation, but I think it's a little bit more practical to have the conversation of what to cut and then see where those numbers are and then reevaluate from there, but that is a tough conversation to have. So if you want to go this way, just numbers, if that's seems like that's the preference. 3 to 4, no, I'm kidding. Really, you want a flat number?
No, I wrote down under 4%.
Under 4, okay.
Okay. Bob, anything more than that?
No, well, I think that, going back and forth right now with individual board members throwing out line items that they want to get rid of isn't all that useful, because we as a board have to provide guidance, and, it's great if one person doesn't like this or that. I think at this point, there's a lot of asks on the table. I think the best thing to do would be to find out where the board feels on a overall tax increase, if any, and go from there, and then have the administration scrub the ask to see how they feel they can get to that.
Right.
And then we could say, well, wait a second, why did you cut this when you should have kept that? And I think that would be more productive, and I know we've done that in previous years. My personal feeling is just getting below 4, I don't think is good enough. I know all of this is arbitrary when it comes right down to it, in trying to pick and solve for a number, but the number in my mind is about 3.75%, which in rough numbers is about a cut of about, I think about 400 grand or so from where we currently are, maybe like 380 grand. Is that right? I'm no mathematician.
How much did you say about what?
3.75.
Okay. No, but you said it's about 100
I
grand.
know, I thought it's about 400 from
400 grand,
the
right.
existing numbers, but you tell me, I mean, you could do the quick math.
Yeah.
That's about right, right?
That was saying yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's my thought, just as a goal to see what in the budget can be rejiggered to get down under 4.
So, Robin?
I hear what you're saying, but I actually feel like there's some kind of board priority questions that should come into play in the course of this budget. I think some of it have to do with world language, just in terms of, is adding the class back from just a K-12 perspective, is it the most efficient use of the resources? Is the direction we went ahead? Is it a global competence course? Is it a language course? Is it, I think it's a bigger question than just saying, where do you want to cut and how do you want to add it in? It's something that comes up a lot. I know some of the preschool parents have been saying, well, why add that course? Why not do a little introduction to language at younger grades? And then, so everyone has a different opinion, but I really think as a board, it's something that we should at least have a discussion about from a kind of priority perspective for language, for world language, and where do we as a board want to see the district going. And I also have kind of my general sense, as I said this before briefly, but I think every ask is necessary and needed, and I just think though we are a very small district with very limited funds, and I think that it seems like a lot of the asks are very concentrated in certain areas this year, and I think there's, if I were going to come in with a percentage, I probably would also say, well, what about taking a step back and seeing if we need other things to help more of the general population and not just the AIS kids this year. And I understand you made a determination not to, but as a board member, I think perhaps that's worth a discussion too. It just seems like a lot of our funds are going to a segment of the population this year. All necessary, all needed, but maybe there's a way to, look at resources and figure out how to also, if you're going to bring a person in, a full-time person, maybe there's a way that a 0.2 of that person can actually go to enrichment instead of just AIS. I don't know. Maybe there's a way to look at that. Maybe there isn't, I know, but that's my take, is when you look at this overall budget, it just seems like there's a lot of money going to one segment in 1 year.
Do you have any specific thoughts, though, in terms of what those additional things are? Because now is definitely the time when we need to start thinking about that.
Well, as I said this before, I think in elementary.
Math coach.
Yeah, the math coach, and frankly, even an ELA coach. We eliminated teacher learning facilitators, which would serve the same purpose as Christine Rosner would on the English side, because we didn't have money. And I know we're adding back now, so I know it's probably not as necessary as some of the things that we're talking about, and there's a strong need there, but at the same point, it affects a lot of kids. It could affect every kid in the district, and maybe it's worth taking a step back and seeing is there some way to at least have the conversation before we just say, no, it's my perspective. At the high school also, I know we made a determination, you're adding some courses back by taking some out, but one of the things that comes up a lot at the high school is, a coding and an app class. I mean, it's very minutia in terms of, you know, it's small. But with if we're adding over $1 million into the budget, it seems like perhaps in this day and age, in 21st century skills, we can look at figuring out a way to get a coding and app class in the high school. Those are just two things off the top of my head. I mean, general things. So that's my, and in terms of the numbers, it's hard. I mean, because I feel like so much of where I feel like ending up depends on what you get for the buy. So if you're gonna, you know, for argument's sake, if you're gonna add a teacher learning accelerator, add back math, and do all this, then I'm probably okay with the 4%. If you're just gonna do that piece, then I probably feel like it's high. So it's hard for me to judge. I'd like to come in lower overall, but it depends on what we're getting for it.
John?
Let me go general then specific. You know, I guess, like Robin, have a hard time evaluating, I guess implicitly everybody, but Robin said it more explicitly. I have a tough time of evaluating the budget increase or tax increase without thinking about what are we getting for that money, right? I mean, there could be a year where we have really strong, obvious, undeniable needs that we have to spend a lot of money on, and we therefore saying, oh, the big tax increase is worth it. There are other years where that's not the case. We also have a big, essentially not quite a windfall, but almost a windfall this year in terms with the pension decrease. And we're filling up that hole with other things and then adding substantially beyond that hole. You know, my impression is that the nature of the things that are in this, the nature of the considerations, and I'm leaving apart the maintenance, which isn't really a consideration. It's just that every year you have a new batch of stuff. But I think it's clear that we have to do that, so I'd leave aside maintenance. It's not the kind of set of proposals that really seem to me to be worth the kind of budget increase we're asking for the community to bear. You know, it's not clear that, you know, whether if we reduced it, if we say, okay, let's reduce the tax increase to 3.5, would it be worth it? I don't know till I see what we get for that, or 2.5, or maybe none. But wouldn't be none because we're going to have a tax increase even with no tax levy increase because our assessed value goes down. But, I mean, I do feel like the kind of increase, the budget increase and the tax increase we have now does not feel to me to be worth what we're getting for it. So either the number should be lower or something. Maybe Bob's proposal of maybe the proposals that we're hearing in the 3 to 4 would be a comfortable number, but I'm skeptical without seeing it. My sense is it may well be that it should be lower than that. We have you know, if we don't have a lot of really compelling things in the schools, I don't think our our instinct should be to fill up every last bit of the tax levy with something. We can give that money back. The community over the years has borne lots of tax increases. I know my own personal property taxes have gone up a lot since I've lived in Irvington, at least doubled. So, you know, maybe we don't need to spend all this money. I'm happy to spend it if it's worth it, but I'm just not convinced it's worth it at this point. Specifics. I think I share some of Robin's concern that the budget asks are concentrated in particular areas, that there isn't enough for more general educational needs such as enrichment or possibly in addition of some needs in the high school. I note peripherally that we're losing some of the honors in the high school with the English program as it's being restructured, and the honors only program. And, you know, so I think we're not necessarily as focused on general education as I'd like to see in terms of our priorities. So that's a sort of kind of speaking to the mix of the budget, which I think is a little bit of the concern, the same concern that Robin raised. I also feel that we have to think about how to pay for tax certs in some way, and that I would really like to see us do that explicitly as part of the budget. And I look forward to hearing what Bev can tell us about tax certs. Because every year we spend a substantial amount of money on them, and they never appear in the budget, even though we do spend money on them. And it's just not, to my mind, a transparent way to budget. On the only other specific comment I would make, I mean, all of this stuff, everything that's been mentioned in the budget sounds like a reasonable idea. It's just that the package of it doesn't strike me as worth the amount of tax increase we're seeing. The only thing that specifically concerns me is adding, I understand all of the good intentions behind it, but adding the 5th grade language, I think that shouldn't be done until we really have a much more holistic discussion about what our language program is supposed to be doing and how it's structured. I think we spend a lot of years in language instruction in the middle school without really enough to show for those years as it is. And we really ought to be discussing that on the whole rather than adding to that program before we have that discussion. That's all I have right now.
So no guidance on the numbers either?
The number needs to be lower because I don't think it's worth the increase we're having. Will it? I don't know what it'll be.
Okay.
Yeah, I can tell you it's too high.
And in terms of addressing the...
But can I also speak, I think that's, it doesn't much matter if I'm going to say 2% and everybody else is going to be 3%. It's going to be 3% anyway. But...
well, it's about trying to come to some consensus.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
should try.
yeah, right.
But if
So
you don't-
far, I think our more or less our consensus is this number needs to be lower. But where that number is, I think you're the only one who hasn't spoken on it.
Right, sure.
But,
I'll be happy to speak.
but I think where it should be, I don't have a strong view at this point.
And just before, I was just, are there any suggested additions? The same question I asked Robin, just because if you're feeling unsatisfied by what the administrators have suggested on their own, is there something specific that?
I don't think I have a basis to give specific suggestions like that. How would I guess would be my answer.
But you have enough of an opinion to reject what they've suggested?
I'm unhappy with the focus. I'm unhappy that where we're expanding money in particular areas and not really expanding in core academic areas. Very little of what we're doing is core academics, and I think we should try to do, if we're going to spend extra money, let's try to spend more money on core academics and really improve the central academic program, which I'm not seeing. But where specifically to spend that money, I don't feel I have the information to.
Well, just a question of, do we hire more teachers?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I could certainly, I'm personally more familiar with the high school and certainly there's plenty of ways to see the benefit there. There may well be benefits in other schools, I just can't speak to it.
Okay. All right, well, I guess that leaves me. So my point of view is that in view of the history that is well laid out on page 19, I'm sort of motivated, first of all, by a desire to be modest in our overall tax increase. And that point of view starts with the fact that we've increased our budget by $8 million since 2011. an aggregate increase in the budget of 3%, but with the particularly heavy increases over the last 2 years. And I remember those discussions that we had as a board that said, well, we need to make some investments in our schools. So we invested 6% in 13-14 and 4% in 14-15. And so, you know, my point of view is to be a little more modest this year, especially since we do have the luxury of some favorable numbers on the retirement benefits side. So my target in thinking about it was a 3.5% target. I would certainly be happy with 3.75. Again, if it seems arbitrary, I think it is arbitrary until you actually see what the administration comes back with. Is in my view, if you could say, well, here's one tranche at 3.5, and here's another tranche at 3.75. You know, so what does it look like as you're kind of bringing this down to a much lower level? And for me, 3.5 seems quite a bit lower than 4.36. Probably would result in, say, $600,000 in cuts versus what's in here right now. So that seems pretty substantial.
So, I'm sorry, 3.5 budget to budget or tax rate?
Tax rate.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Which would be a smaller budget increase, right?
Yeah, the budget necessarily comes down at 3.5, pretty substantially. It would come down probably to like 2.1 budget to budget.
Bill, can I make maybe a question on how a point about how we've been talking about a lot of these things? I think there's a number of things that we've talked about that are great, but they're really, like, I think foundations, for example, going to second grade, that really aren't very much money, you know, and they're not, to my mind, a lot of them aren't really seriously budget issues, because they're not, we could take a little money out of something else, and I'm sure we could find money to extend foundations to second grade, or there's got to be a number of other examples where there's not a lot of money. Where it costs serious money is mostly, except for all the maintenance stuff, is where we have to hire new people, I think. And beyond that, it's really just, you know, it's nice to talk about these things, but it doesn't make much difference for deliberations.
Address that.
Yeah, okay, good.
I mean, I was
fine maybe on that, but.
Yeah, so I was going to say that generally speaking, I'm supportive of the operations and maintenance budget and feel that that was well detailed. I had one exception, which was I just happen to believe, as you know, that paving the middle school parking lot is a luxury at $50,000. I happened to walk through it myself and didn't feel it was any worse than a lot of other asphalt in Irvington. So I would just say, you know, let's hold off another year and see what it's like in another year. But that's just a small thing.
I did notice that the other parking lot where I just parked today has this great big fault line in it now.
Is that the one you think, the middle school?
No, it's not the middle school one, it's the one down here by the high school. Yeah.
Well, anyway, let me just finish. So,
It might be the winter.
So, but, you know, overall, I'm quite supportive of the maintenance budget. And then I think in terms of people, I think, you know, we were talking about maybe adding 7 or 8 people overall, between the clerical person, 2 special education, half a psychologist, AIS, and I know I'm missing 1 or 2 others. But I think that we just have to have a slightly smaller footprint in terms of adding additional staff. Again, because it is expensive, and B, I just think we should be sensitive to our staffing overall. And I would think that I'm still open to being persuaded. I think the administrators did an excellent job tonight, but the exercise of going through and cutting back to 3.75 or 3.5 will help us focus on what's really necessary.
Can I add some
Yeah, of course,
commentary?
sure.
I mean, appreciate the feedback and guidance, and we're certainly going to strategize in how to get that point to prioritize, and in doing so, reflecting on not only our own thinking, but the feedback that we received from the board tonight. And maybe in particular, responding to some of Robin and John's comments. I recognize the optics to the budget, and someone looking in from the outside, and I'm saying that with people that are not in this room in mind. it gives the appearance that the budget is certainly very heavy in addressing this, students with special need. You know, there are other things that are embedded in the budget, whether it was looking at world language, Project Lead the Way, other services that are going to certainly enhance learning for all students. But I think the one underlying message that is here is that the needs are here to stay, so it seems. When we think about providing additional services in special education, very true, it serves children with IEPs. When we think about additional AIS support, definitely it serves kids that are experiencing challenges. But what you have to do, I think you really have to dig a little bit deeper. You have to think about that impact that when we're reducing that student-teacher ratio in a classroom, what that does have on every single child. So when we're looking at a situation where we have kids that are struggling for longer periods of time, it's going to cost the district much more money. Those students are going to have more difficulties as they advance through the grades. But when we sit back and we look at what's happening in the classroom and provide early interventions and increase targeted support in those areas, there's going to be opportunity for all of the children in our schools to receive more individualized instruction. The general ed teachers are going to be able to focus on kids in different ways, to be able to extend learning, to be able to enrich learning. So I recognize the optics that are there, but I just implore you to think a little differently when you look at that those are really requests that are going to benefit all of our kids, even though they are targeting a particular audience in a given area. But your feedback is well taken. I just wanted to add a different perspective to that thought.
I understand the value of that I think the essential idea being that if you free up the main classroom teacher's time, that teacher will then have more time to spend on kids who don't need the support. Right, that's clear. I just, you know, in sitting here through the year, I'm not, you know, I'm concerned about the lack of focus on the higher achieving kids. You know, it's not in the discussion of test results so much. It's not really in the budget discussion. There's a lot of focus on, you know, I think we just need to make sure that I don't want the district's priorities to, I don't know, I'm not sure how to finish that sentence, but I'm just concerned about.
I think your point
I'm
is,
concerned about the lack of focus and the lack of tending to the kids who maybe aren't quote-unquote struggling, but can benefit from more challenge or more what have you, and at the different levels in our schools.
Yeah, and your point, John, your point isn't lost on me. I think the conversation here is that we're charged with educating every single child.
Correct.
And that is children that are achieving beyond grade level and that have potential to move beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at children that are 2 years below grade level because they have disabilities or have had gaps in their education. That work to educate all of our children, that focus about general education, the focus on acceleration is occurring on a daily basis. It's
Right.
embedded in the curriculum work that is being led by Raina and our instructional leaders on a daily basis. That curriculum work is leading teachers to want to push kids to think in different ways, to challenge them in different ways, to increase the bar on what our expectations are, to have common expectations across the board. So I just, you know, I understand your point.
Just,
Again, it
just
comes
not
to the
hearing
optics
enough
of it.
evidence of
Yeah.
it.
But I
That's
think
the
there's-
thing. I hear it, and I totally am on board with every child's needs. Don't get me wrong,
No.
but I'm just
And
not hearing enough evidence of.
I really just need to respond also, which is I am all for all the AIS funding. I mean, I think I'm for
Me too.
figuring out a way to address these AIA issues. I think it's very important. It's not, from what I said, does not mean don't do it, or I'm not an advocate of it. I'm a huge advocate of that. But I also think we need to take a step back and say, okay, are we using our resources effectively? Are there better ways to use our resources instead of just automatically hiring more people? I don't know the answer, but I really don't think that that's been completely exhausted. And I think that there might be, there might be ways to figure out, there might be a better mousetrap for us. I don't feel like we've explored that.
Can I just share a
Let me
historical?
just-
Oh, I'm sorry.
One more thing though also, and the other thing also is, I really think we need to drill down with this. And I think, yes, part of it might be Common Core, the teachers being stretched, but are there things that we could be doing in the day-to-day instruction in the classroom that might better fit the needs for all of our kids? I don't know. I have no idea, but I don't know if we've ever looked at that. And I just don't want to get in the pattern of constantly just hiring. I think we need to maybe just drill down and make sure we really understand kind of the overall source of what's going on.
So if I could just give just a little bit of historical perspective, it's not an answer, but it's perspective. So I want to say when I got here in 2001, we had one AP course, and I think in my years here we went to 19 AP courses. So I think that there was a strong push as a district to really build our capacity and really provide those other more rigorous opportunities for our students. One of the things that I just think is worth noting and grappling with, and Robin, I'm not disagreeing with that, how do we allocate sources or reallocate our resources, but one of the things that both Dave and Scott have said, they've talked about the numbers of students. There is a direct correlation between the numbers of students who have IEPs and 504s and the need. So for years we were building our more rigorous, our AP courses, our super courses, and trying to make sure that we were meeting the needs of all of those students. But there is a direct correlation between those numbers and the demand for the special education support. And the piece that Dave shared tonight about the state of mental health in this country is being reflected everywhere. It's not just in Irvington. So I guess I just wanted to point out that it's not, those numbers are steeped in a correlation to our IEP and 504 numbers. And
right.
So.
And again, if we've looked really hard and exhausted all the possibilities, I agree, it has to be done. We have to address the needs of those kids, no doubt. I'm all for that, just not at the cost of everybody else.
And the one other point I want to make, and then it's not for a lot of debate now, is to think about maintaining tax base. And we did have a lot of relief this year because of the break in the pension costs. So that concern about where we are and when we hit that tipping point somewhere along the way, the thought about, where are we going to be with respect to cap and just maintaining existing programs becomes a concern. And I'm not saying that as being an advocate for taxes. I remember sitting my first budget process here 3 years ago, and actually dialogue coming from board and community expressing concern about that very topic. So I just say that there is a point where our expenses are going to grow beyond the cap.
But there's also the concern though. Just overall in Irvington. You don't want to keep creating an infrastructure that's where people can't afford to live here anymore.
Every time Chris speaks, you feel compelled to, just.
Yeah, and I don't know if you could speak for how everybody in Irvington feels, but can I ask, can we move on? I think we've given the.
Yeah, we've given the direction.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you had another comment.
Yeah.
No, I could, but it seems, I'm not going to tell John that, everybody in Irvington that I know has a far different experience with our schools than he's speaking of. And Robin, you've been on the board for 9 years, and to suggest that in all of these very specific things that we've heard in this meeting and also in the roundtable with the principals earlier, to suggest that the principals are not drilling down to try to find out, and the administration is not drilling down to find out the best way to educate our kids, it just seems silly to me in light of all the information that we've been provided. So you're entitled to your opinion, but I think that and you guys can weigh in if you want, but the two of you take a lot of time for these meetings with the back and forth questions, but it's not the view of myself by any means, and I doubt it's going to ultimately be the view of the board.
Of the majority of the board, you mean?
Well, but still, it doesn't matter.
Of what doesn't matter?
Wait, can we?
Because the board acts as a board, John. You're entitled to your views.
Yeah, I don't appreciate being called silly, though.
I didn't call you silly.
Yeah, you did.
I did not.
We're all entitled to our views.
Yeah, I
and we
just
all need
think
to
we're
respect-
getting
we all need to
unnecessarily
respect each
personal.
other's views. We shouldn't belittle other people's views.
I didn't
It's
belittle
not
your
appropriate.
views, I just
All right, so let's,
doesn't make
let's,
sense.
Okay,
let's move on.
Everyone.
Right. All right, so we can now hear from the community on this particular subject, I think.
We want to talk about the capital fund?
No, because we,
Okay.
I thought we
I
did.
didn't know if you were going to have a conversation within context of this as
No,
well.
I didn't think so.
All right.
I'd like to hear from the community because people have been sitting here for a while and 1, 2, 3 people. Anybody have any comments?
Community's rotated itself like with,
Yeah.
for
No? Okay, okay.
Hi, Michael Hanna from South Buckout. And this is so wonderful for the three of us that are here tonight, and hopefully many others who are watching, to hear from you. I do want to echo that I think from everyone I'm hearing, the special ed number is really big, and it's for a reason. I think you guys have done a great job explaining what that reason is, but I think once you make a decision, I can only suggest gently that you need to go out to the community and explain that story as well, because I don't think we understand it. One other question my question that I have is, I have heard wonderful things about the effect of having a math coach in our K through 6, and I've been very happy with ELA for my children, but I have heard and observed some concerns just with the Common Core shift and the opportunity to just add value to our teachers. I was kind of think there might be a potential for an ELA coach as an ask. And that's my question. Do we need something like that? Would that help us?
That's a good question. I think we can use the idea of the coaches, the math enrichment that we used to have. We can have our administration do some additional thinking about that as part of the next step in preparation for our April 9th meeting, because that's generally what happens now. We start thinking about what we want to cut, what we want to add, and that this is the appropriate time to ask that question. Anybody else have an opinion about the math coach enrichment, going back with that again? No? Okay. But you've heard that direction, right?
We've heard the commentary. and
Heard the
that-
commentary.
I mean, look, I mean, I have no data or detailed information on this one way or another. It seems like a good idea. It was, when we were talking, just to be clear, we're talking about something, a person to offer enrichment in math and/or ELA to
No.
the elementary.
No, that
grades.
wasn't discussed.
Now, what are we talking about?
Well,
with
Robin
college?
originally had brought up
I was saying
No,
that
about
take
math.
the idea, the concept of Christine Rosner, who goes in and works with the teachers in math.
Oh,
But I'm
okay.
saying do that in ELA, but it doesn't even
Okay.
have to be elementary. It depends where the need is. It could be K to 12, and then they put her where the need is. It just seems like if we're spending so much time on ELA and redesigning at all levels, it might be helpful and effective to have someone there working with the teachers and optimizing that strategy.
Okay.
So that's what I was saying.
Okay, I thought you were talking about enrichment. You're not. Okay.
Well, there was an earlier meeting when you did suggest
That
that we
was
should
that was a different piece.
add
Okay,
enrichment.
okay, right.
Okay, so I think we're done with our community at this point. They're done with
Did
us.
that come out as you meant?
Now, that 4.5% tax increase.
Anything else? No. So we will close out our budget discussion and talk about our policy committee and liaison reports.
The capital fund, that comes later?
Well, we're voting on it later, so I thought
Oh,
we'd hold
okay,
it.
okay, yeah, sorry.
Thank you to our administrators for bearing with us until 10:30.
Safe travels.
Just be glad you get to leave now. So can we have our policy committee report from Maria and John?
Okay.
Brevity will be rewarded.
Well, the report is quite simple. We met, we've reviewed a variety of policies. Most, with the exception of 2, appear on the agenda as first reads. But we wanted to have a discussion with the board first. Should we do this now, regarding more direction?
Yeah, let me,
with our
do you want me
policies?
to just raise
Go right
the
ahead.
issue, because there was maybe more my issue. You know, we don't have necessarily, I almost think we shouldn't do it now because it's getting late, but we just float the issues and we can talk about it another time. I think the issue is, to what extent should the policy process be sort of driven by, well, what is required, a couple issues. One is, to what extent should the board drive the policy process as what it views as important for the school district? I mean, I think a school of thought that policies are how a school board sets the direction of the district, and it's one of the main levers it has to do that. What we are going through at this stage is a different sort of a process whereby somebody is reviewing our policies to see where they don't comply with a list of what may or may not be required under the law or regulation. And it's a little murky in some cases what we're required to do in policy, whether we're required to have a policy on a particular issue, or whether we're just putting into a policy what the district is required to do by regulation or law. But it's not necessarily required to have a policy on that, it's just required to do it, right? And do we codify all those requirements under policy or not? And I think we haven't, I think we've had a tendency in our initial work with the New York State School Boards Association to kind of write down in policy all the things that we're required as a district to do, whether or not, and whether we're actually required to have the policy is a little, to my mind, unclear. And we've been working to try to understand those things, and we're not necessarily through understanding them in certain areas.
So let me try to.
Does that make sense? That's the question,
Let me give
I think.
a little, maybe a little clearer example. There have been certain there have been some new regulations, for example, and based on regulations, NISBA has been making recommendations to us, the policy committee, as to what policies we should have in place to comply. And one of the issues that you have been struggling with is, do we need a policy just because there's a regulation?
Right.
Right?
And the
Simply
regulation
that.
doesn't necessarily say a district must have a policy on this. For example, homeless, one of the things we haven't brought to the board yet, and there's still some back and forth, and it's time consuming to do this stuff, frankly, and I haven't always been able to stay on top of it. There certainly are clear laws and regulations on how we need to deal with homeless students. And the definition of homeless is broader than the person sleeping on the proverbial street. It's, people who might be displaced from their current home for various reasons. And we obviously need to comply with the law, and apparently do comply with the law, and there are, some small number of students who do fall in this bucket. Does that mean we need to write a policy on it, or is it enough just to comply with the law? And, it's a question we've been struggling with. We don't need to answer it now, but that's the sort of thing kind of that comes up, I think.
How do we get to an answer?
Well, if I may add an administrative perspective, so there are clear cases where law states that a school district needs to have a particular policy, and I don't think there's debate over that, where a particular regulation or statute calls for it. In some cases, there's, things that have been acts of legislature that specifically call for things such as our DASA policies and things along those lines.
Right.
Where I step back and you look at the situation regarding homeless, I totally agree, there's some requirements that are murky. So we have, bless you, a document that I sent to the committee last week, is a document with SED asking us to implement a homeless policy. So, it's kind of one of those things. We're looking at a situation with respect to field testing, right? You can't find the law that says it, there's laws around it, but SED here in writing is telling us we need to do it to satisfy Title I requirements. But when I step away from that, when you look at education law books, a book is this thick, and that's just looking at specific things to New York, and then there's layers of federal law, and then there's other types of human service laws that impact how we run our business. To think that a school administrator or teacher is going to be able to know every one of those pages in a law book like that is not reasonable. What the policy does do, though, it breaks out and highlights those high-line expectations for common areas of business that are going to come up and give us that guidance. We as school administrators do refer to our policy manual for direction when you're looking for specific things, and when you need further clarity, then we go to the law books. It also helps establish expectation for community. When we talk about transparency, if we're talking about homeless, for example, a community member wants to know why or how, that is a resource for them as well. So I think it serves as a tool to guide the work that we do, and there's an element of accountability for the district by having the policy.
Yeah.
But it also, I mean, we've never really proactively gone through and figured out what kind of a district we want to be, and do we need to create policies to reflect that, or enhance policies? Because it seems like a lot of what we do is just make sure we comply with the law, but.
Sounds like a good place to start.
Completely, but I'm assuming that that's what we do all the time. Like, I mean, that's certainly from what I understand. I've never been on policy, but that, the
We comply with the
baseline
law
is
no
we
matter
comply
what.
with the law. But then, I mean, just not to bring up something from the past, but the whole issue of student expression, that was where there's a lot of openness in terms of how a district wants to define itself. And it's up to the district. Do you want to define yourself? Do you not? Do you want to write a policy? Do you not? And I guess I feel like, I don't know if we have the time, but we've never really addressed that.
But that's kind of not what the issue is right now.
Well, no,
That's what
yeah,
we're
No,
at.
that's a separate.
But I'm just saying that there's a sort of philosophical approach. I don't think we need to, beat to the ground right now, but it's.
I made a note of it. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, and I think we need to think about how we have this conversation, because I have to tell you that Elaine and I just got an email that's pretty scary to look at the project in front of us and all the work that we're gonna be doing with the policy committee. And our effort in reviewing the policy manual isn't to evaluate where we wanna be on a position as far as our philosophy about who we wanna be or what types of policies we wanna have. It's an effort to look at our existing policies to see where our legal voids are. So we need to make a commitment to that work through that lens, or we need to back off and the board make a decision on the direction that we're going, because we can dedicated time and energy towards that, and we've also committed public resources to that.
And I think we just need to clarify what the legal requirements are about having, first of all, where are we required to have where are we legally required to have a policy? Fine. If we can establish that, we should have a policy, and there's no doubt. If we don't have one, we should have one. Then the question becomes, all these other things, are we going to be in the business of codifying the laws and regulations of the state in our policies, and is that really necessary or not? And it's obviously not necessary in some areas. Maybe it is in others, and we need to understand what the issues are in our district, I think, as we do that. I think it's not a simple process, but I'm certainly happy to engage in it.
All right, well, so we have a question on the table that we're not going to answer tonight, and it's the philosophical question. Nevertheless, we still do have policies that we are going to be looking at shortly.
Yeah,
right?
and in the context of one of those, I'll talk about an issue.
And there's one in this discussion that highlights exactly.
Well, there's actually a couple I can think of that
Right.
highlight different things. Yeah, there's, the
tobacco.
tobacco has one. It's a little different
the
issue
electric
there.
cigarettes.
And, no, but it's something else. Well, and also the homebound instruction, yes. Just tell you a little bit about the process as we get to that.
Right.
We're not there yet.
Yeah,
Okay.
you look puzzled. Don't worry, it's nothing bad. Okay.
So shall we pivot to our communications committee report? Do you want me to do that quickly?
Go ahead.
Okay, so we really drilled into three things. And then Robin brought up a fourth thing apropos of those other things in the meeting. And the first thing was we talked about, in relation to the budget, that we would like to experiment with some newspaper ads this year. It's not something we've done before. It's not expensive. A newspaper ad in the enterprise is in the hundreds of dollars, so we're not talking about spending tens of thousands of dollars advertising in Time Magazine. We want to see if newspaper ads will help us get the word out better about our budget process, budget needs. Just general communication, obviously consistent with requirements of informing people and not taking a position. That was number one. Number two, we talked about branding our district more effectively because we have many different logos and we do not have a uniform style guide with respect to typeface or colors even. And we were impressed with what Dobbs Ferry did with their new branding. And not that we necessarily have to compare ourselves to our sister district, but what they did roll out was fairly impressive. And so that sort of motivated the conversation around that. And we further said that we don't think we can tackle this in the short term. This would be something that we would consider doing over the summer, or beginning over the summer. And then the third thing we talked about was the website, just sort of general kind of criticisms of our existing website, the way that content's organized and the usability of the content. And we talked about whether we should be enlisting Edline, the company, to work with us to improve the website, or were there other solutions that we should be employing and just kind of parting ways with Edline. And I think our short-term answer was that we were at least going to reach out to Edline and see what happens, although our expert that was on the phone with us said he doubted whether Edline would even engage with us, that they were so large with their 3,000 schools, or whatever the number is that they service, that they wouldn't be they wouldn't have good customer service with us.
And just to interject also, what we mentioned that last time this came up at the board level, Edline was just bought out by this one big company, now owns pretty much all of them. So we were kind of hoping or promised, or however you want to take it, that we were going to be able to utilize the resources of all these other companies, these online web companies for districts, and that it would be much better. But in reality, according to the experts, no, they still keep them very separate, and Edline is still Edline, and we haven't been able to realize any benefits from that overall takeover, which is unfortunate. So.
It's called a monopoly. Right.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a, it is a monopoly. And then, in talking about other things we could do, Robin had an excellent suggestion, which was thinking about the structure of the email that we've been using with Constant Contact. And literally within days after that, we got a new template up and running. And the new email format, I think, went out this weekend. So thanks for starting that, and thanks to Elaine for working on getting that new email format out, because I think it is a lot clearer, and the branding is better, and it's just a more professional communication. So that was our communication notes, unless you want to add anything, Robin?
No,
okay. That brings us to curriculum.
Yep.
Yep. Go ahead.
Okay, we touched about part of it, the
PDP?
Yeah, the PDP? PDP. Raina brought us up to speed, which she did at the beginning of the meeting, about why we need this document to be on file for compliance purposes. We also talked about how in her department in human resources, or as a district, we are required to keep track of teachers' professional development hours. They're required, 7,500 over 5 years?
175.
175, that's what I had wrong. They're required to have 175 hours over 5 years, and if they're not in, and if they don't have those hours, then they're out of compliance with their certification. So they no longer accrue tenure and all of that, correct?
Well, they really can't teach.
Oh, they can't teach at all?
No, if someone's certification expires or it goes at Yeah, they technically really cannot be teaching for us, so.
So while we don't have to provide the professional development, we are required to maintain those records. And Rena talked about a program that they use called My Learning Plan, which helps, and teachers can actually go on and track and see how they're doing over the 5 years.
So this is not the in-district professional development, or is it?
Almost any professional development, they're called PD hours. And teachers can collect PD hours in all kinds of ways. They could take a Saturday course, they can do things within the school district. Our faculty meetings can count towards those hours.
Or superintendent's conference days?
Conference day can count toward those hours.
Bunch of hours there.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. But sorry, but we're not required to actually use paid faculty hours for that purpose. They could do it outside for this 175-hour.
Yeah, there's no requirement in terms of us, it can be any combination.
Yeah.
What we are required to do is track and submit it on a yearly basis.
Okay. We got an update on the English department. We were informed that the English teachers in 9th grade, in the writing course, the every other day course, are collaborating with the science and social studies teachers. They're partnering up with them with some upcoming writing pieces that they're going to have in these other disciplines, and they're going to be working on them within the, the every other day writing class that we added in 9th grade.
Yeah, why are you looking at me?
That they're partnering with them in that. We thought that was a nice update for us, giving us an idea of where the addition in the budget went this year. We also discussed the guidance department. The packets have now been received, but at our last meeting, we were talking about some of the new English classes that they're going to be offering at the high school. Well, packets were mailed to 9th grade parents specifically, giving them times to meet with the guidance counselors and the students, with the parents. And it's a whole course description of the new classes for 9th and 10th grade. 9th, 10th, and 11th grade students. Telling them about the new additions and what course selections they have for next year. And those actually, I could say, they were received at the end of last week. 9th grade, we discussed the American Literature and Presentation Speaking classes. And I don't know why I have this here, ICT. Are any of these going to be an ICT model?
Yeah, so, so the reason that you have that there was what we talked about was unlike in a 9th grade English class, it's 9th grade English, everybody takes 9th grade English. Well, now we have these electives. So we needed to designate classes where ICT would be available. So if a student is, if through the CSE, a student is recommended for an ICT classroom, it would be either presentational speaking or American Lit. But let's say we had a student who wanted to take graphic novels. What we said was that what we wouldn't want to do is exclude them from that, but then we would have to ensure that there's a resource room or an academic support that would allow that child to still have the supports to be successful and not feel locked in, because we want kids to be able to take advantage of those electives as 11th and 12th graders.
Right, because what also came out clear in the meeting was the English Regents used to be given at the end of 11th grade. Now that it's given at the end of 10th grade, the district is able now to make a lot of changes to our course offerings and offer selectives. So they have to take English come 11th grade, but now instead of being an 11th grade English class, now they have choices. And it could be a half year this, a half year that, AP classes, now there are more choices and we have more flexibility because of that.
I learned as a parent today that there have been 11th graders who've taken the sequence of the SUPA public speaking course followed by what had been an honors American literature course, and that now the American literature course will no longer be strictly an honors course, which will, I think, change it in some ways.
It's AP now.
No, there's an AP
American
separate, but that's a
there's
separate
also
thing.
an
But
honors.
people,
I see.
so the SUPA
Got it.
public speaking will no longer fit with an honors course per se
Oh.
in the sequence.
So I just want to clarify that. I think, and I think, John, you said it, but strictly honors was, I think, the word that you
Yeah,
had
there's an
used.
honors designation,
Right.
but it'll be not an honors, not solely an honors level.
So students will be able to, students will be able to receive honors credit and through American literature, which they've always been able to do. The difference is that the class is not strictly honors. So there can be students in there who are taking it for the honors designation and students who are not taking it for the honors designation. Students who would be taking it for the honors designation would obviously have additional rigor and additional assignments to meet that standard.
And we have other classes like this in district, don't we?
Can I,
sorry.
the problem that we're
Yeah,
having
oh.
right now is that it's 5 of 11.
Sorry.
We have
Yep, okay.
Have a lot.
6 policies to go
Well,
through.
Okay,
Can we,
one
can
more.
we
ask a
table the
question?
policies
Yeah,
maybe?
can we table the policies and move to the consent agenda?
Yeah, I think that might be a good, we don't need to do these
One more
policies in
thing
most
from the
cases.
meeting.
no.
We're just never gonna get to them.
Oh, you can table them to April 9th.
Or is there any particular policy that is so urgent
That's
that we
what
have to
I'm
do
just-
tonight?
Is there,
They're all first reads, so we're not taking any action on
Well,
them.
did anyone have any questions on any of the
I
policies?
have comments on everyone.
Yeah, so we should table them unless there's something that has to be done tonight. I think it's just gotten too late.
what's that?
Can I add
Just
one
table
more
it?
thing to the curriculum meeting? There's one more point.
Yep, yep.
Was just that, I think, Raina, you also mentioned that you guys are doing an audit of all the clerical responsibilities and who does what. And I think that's just relevant in terms of the budget, so that you'll be able to kind of more effectively allocate resources
Yes.
after you do the audit.
That's a
So-
great idea. Who's doing that?
At the high school, I'm going to be doing it at the high school, and with this request for this additional person, we thought it was important that there was a lot of clarity around who's doing what and who should be doing what, and how do we make sure that,
It was one of my findings from the budget task force.
oh, is that true?
That's why I'm
Oh,
smiling.
really?
Remember that, Phil?
Blast from the past.
Yes. All right, so we are tabling our policies, Elaine. Can we have a motion to table the items under 8.1 through 8.6?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? That was,
Aye.
so,
Size second.
Oh, I thought you seconded.
I thought you said no.
Yeah. Maria said it too, we just didn't hear it.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so onto our consent agenda. I think it makes sense to pull out 10.2 and discuss and vote on it separately. And also 10.4 is not in the consent agenda. Right, so,
I'd like to pull out all of the tens. There's 4 of them, I think, right?
including the professional development, all right?
Well, 10.4 is in part of the consent
Yeah,
agenda.
it's not part of the.
Oh, okay, well, then I don't have to pull it out, it's already been, it's not in.
Not doing the reserve fund, right?
Calendar, capital reserve.
It's- We
We're
can
not
just
doing
take,
ten?
we can vote on them separately.
Yeah.
We're not doing 10, okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
So consent agenda will eliminate 10. Do I need a motion to change that, Elaine? To take. I just- Right, oh, I see it,
Alternate
right,
agenda.
right, I see, so you just change it. So it's everything,
11, 12, 13.
yep. So can I have a motion to accept the consent agenda, the revised consent agenda, which is 11, 12, and 13?
So moved.
Second.
Okay,
Second.
so now do we have any questions about the consent agenda items that we need to talk about, anything relating to personnel? Again, this is excluding everything in 10. Nope. Okay, hearing none, can I have a vote to approve the consent agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so the consent agenda has been approved. So our last bit of business is here. First of all, we have 10.1. Discussion on 10.1?
I would just want to reiterate my previous concern on the, and it's related to what my concern will be on 10.3. It's the nature of our professional development, the time we're spending on it, and also the fact that we don't have any clear handle on how that time is being spent, which goes to an email exchange we had this week. So, with that, I'm just not comfortable. I think as a board, we haven't really reviewed these issues enough, so my preference would be not that I'm against the calendar, not that I'm against professional development, I just don't feel like we've done enough as a board for my taste, so I'd just like to abstain from those votes,
Okay.
rather than vote against them.
Yep.
That's okay?
All right, can I have a motion?
Yeah.
Motion to accept 10.1?
So moved.
Second.
Can I, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So it's 4 with 1 abstention, or is it, do you want to vote no? Or
No, I don't want to vote no, because it's not that I think it's a bad idea, I just don't.
it's an abstention? Got it. All right, on to our capital reserve fund proposition, that's 10.2. Discussion on 10.2. Any questions?
I mean, in theory, the biggest concern I have with it, especially when you use that example, I'm like, oh my God, when you said, oh, we could use the capital reserve to re-turf, if we have to do a new carpet, and I'm like, elections in this town are tough, and getting people to vote for things we know it could be challenging and divisive, and there's a lot of adjectives I could use to describe it, and I'm very concerned that we're gonna have all this money sitting there, and it is gonna take so much time and effort on everybody's part in order to get the community to agree to let us spend it, that I'm not convinced it's the right thing to do. And that's my concern. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm very concerned about it. And that's why I was asking, we can't even liquidate it without a vote? What if we could never do anything with that money?
So I don't know how to assuage those concerns other than noting that a lot of districts have it and it's commonplace. And I think the impact of having this actually would have the opposite impact on the community. It's showing that the district and the board are being responsible and saving for those opportunities, that it's withdrawing money essentially from a savings account rather than taking a loan. So if anything, to me, I think it has the possibility of having the very opposite effect. People think, hey, they're planning for the future. One of the critiques in and around the bond for those was how are you going to finance a new carpet, whether that's a decision for the board down the road to make or not. But it could be the parking lot that John just spoke of, and all of a sudden we have $300,000 worth of paving, and does that hit the general fund, or are we going out to bond that kind of work? My last district, and the rules were a little different in New Jersey, but in my last district, we had it, and that's how we managed our expenses. Dobbs Ferry, for example, if we're going to reference them, in their recent bond, they withdrew money for that kind of purpose to offset what they were borrowing.
I think the other thing is that establishing the fund does not necessarily mean that we're creating an albatross for future boards to deal with. I mean, because it's just, all we're doing is establishing the fund. We
There's
can
no
put a de
obligation.
minimis amount in,
Again, my biggest concern is the money, we're not gonna be able to access that money. And I'm sure we'll be able to find things that people will let us do, but that's my biggest fear is we'll have $2 million sitting there and we won't be
Yeah.
be able to use it.
Can I just respond to that?
Fine.
Suppose there's a project in the future we want to do and we're going to use that money. If that project is worth doing, we would otherwise be floating a bond to do it. It's got to be at least marginally easier to draw the money out of the capital fund and get it approved than to do the bonds.
And to pay the interest.
Which is true.
Yeah, that's the cost down the road.
Which is true.
So I think we're, whatever the difficulty in doing a project, it gets slightly easier with this fund. It's still going to be, if it was hard before, it's going to be a little easier now.
And another argument for you to think of, there are also people here who think we have too much money in our fund balance, and we should be using our fund balance. Not that I agree with this, I'm just saying that we should be using our fund balance to pay for certain things. So, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I actually think the opposite. I actually think it does, as Chris says, it looks like we're being proactive, we're saving. You know, there are people who think we should be saving for tax source, though that's a separate issue.
Yeah.
I actually don't look at it as, if we're asking people, we're actually asking them, can we spend this money this way? We have it, it's not gonna impact you financially, but this is what the board at, 5 years down the road says we need to be spending on.
The other aspect of it is that we do run we have these long-term, they're not capital spending, but money is fungible to some extent anyway. And we do have these long-term unfunded obligations for retiree health care, which we can't directly put money aside. But if we put aside other money, we will increase our level of fiscal prudence. And that's a good thing, I think, for us to do.
I agree. I think it's a no-brainer.
And if Bob and John agree, it's got to be good.
Yeah, there's some huge flaw that nobody's figured out yet.
Just because we're too tired. So by tomorrow morning, we'll figure out why we're wrong.
Yeah. So
We'll
can
talk
I,
about
all right, so can I have a motion to approve this action 10.2?
So moved.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, aye.
I'm gonna abstain. I'm
You're against it?
I'm
or you're-
neutral.
She's
I'm
neutral,
totally
yeah.
You're
neutral.
neutral.
Okay, fine.
All right,
Okay.
so it's 4 with 1 abstention.
For out.
For,
It's like a tie in
no.
hockey, you should have a shootout or
So
something.
now we're on to our professional development plan 10.3, which John, I think, has a comment on, right?
No, it's the same point, that
So
I'll
same
just
point,
abstain from this
okay.
one as well.
So can I have a motion to accept 10.3?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
I abstain.
Right. And then lastly, but most importantly, our resolution that is a joint resolution in kind with Dobbs Ferry, in the sense that they adopted this resolution last Thursday after I reached out to the board president there in view of the fact that we are being hampered in so many ways, as this resolution eloquently points out. This is the resolution from the Westchester Putnam School Board Association. It's on their website, if anybody cares.
If I could make one comment on this?
Please make a comment.
You know, the board's aware I had sent out, after I spoke with you last week, an email sort of updating the community on these various activities in Albany. And something that I've done from time to time. And I was ridiculously surprised by the outpouring of not only concern for these issues from the community, but how far-flung the email went with the PTSA and the IEF also sending it around to their email lists in the community. I can tell you that after that occurred, and the PTSA had an email out already, but literally hundreds of residents, and I confirmed that number in talking with the PTSA and IEF, people signed those petitions that supported this type of action. So I feel that the community is overwhelmingly in support, and it's good that we're teaming up with the local districts to at least make our voice heard. I question how much effect it's going to have for a wealthier district like Irvington, but at the same time, it doesn't mean we shouldn't make our voice heard.
We got to give it a shot.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know what, they're all elected officials. They will hear it if a school board votes in a
Yep.
certain way.
So can I have a motion to accept this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Can I speak? Can we talk about it first?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought that was it.
Oh, no, I thought we,
Do we need to rescind that?
just go ahead.
Okay,
Actually, I'm just happy to abstain, if that's okay.
all
I
right.
really don't feel the need to talk about it, but I just feel like I
Yeah,
don't know.
but
I just don't know anything anywhere. There's a lot of stuff in this resolution that I have no clue whether,
Okay.
no basis for forming an opinion on, and I just would rather not vote on it.
Okay. So did you get that? That's 4-0-1. All right, and I think we have concluded our business, aside from our poor beleaguered table policies.
Let's do the policy.
4-6, right?
I had a short ride home tonight.
Right, so our next meeting is April 9th. So everybody,
Thursday.
what's that?
Please note that it's Thursday.
It's a Thursday, thank you. Oh, that's right, I forgot that. So we have an executive session on the 26th. That's on Thursday. It's a special meeting. It's an executive session. And then our next public meeting, regular meeting, is on April 9th for a continuation of the budget discussion. Can I have a motion to adjourn this meeting, please?
So moved.
So moved.
We have two.
Second.
Second, thank you. Right, so,
John B.
all in favor? Aye.
She said half of Irvington was there on the 20% off sale.
I didn't even,
Sorry.
I totally forgot, I see her taking out.
I had a bad feeling about those policies.
We're so